Welcome to a brand new day. It's the AM show with Benjamin Akakpo and Bernice Lansah. And it's always fabulous on a Thursday, my day. Well, coming up shortly, we'll be serving you the news with Pakwesi Shandov, as he's always done. And right after that, we get into the news review. Expect us to have a discussion with Benjamin Esuman, Executive Director of Solidaire Ghana. He will be joining us for that discussion as we get into the papers. But after that, very interesting stuff we're bringing your way by way of the big stories. First, the latest national poll conducted by Global Info Analytics shows that Dr. Muhammadu Bawumia, the Vice President, and Alan Kyerematen are leveled at 40% apiece among NPP voters. However, among general voters, Alan Kyerematen still has the upper hand over the Vice President. In the race to lead the NDC, the poll shows John Mahama is still the favorite to lead the opposition party. We discuss these issues and the undercurrents with Dr. Kobi Benta, a lecturer, Political Communications Department of Communication Studies at the University of Ghana. We'll also be joined by CDD fellow Dr. John Osai Kwapong and Catherine Afeku. It's been a while, right? Former Minister, Tourism, Arts and Culture. But also on the show today, we get you the latest on government's DDE, the Domestic Debt Exchange Program. A joint technical committee is expected to meet later today to review options proposed by the individual bondholders. And that's the consensus reached between the Finance Ministry and the individual bondholders at a meeting at the ministry on Wednesday. But the question is, how will things go, especially as we know that a lot of them are not willing to budge? Joining us for that conversation, Professor Lord Mensah, lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School, and Martin Pebu, a lawyer who represents a caucus of these bondholders. Also on board, Dr. Richmond Etiahene, he's a banking consultant. Later on the show, as always, we open the doors to you. Send in your messages, call us, let's know what's on your mind. The hashtag is AM Show. Up next, though, is the news with Pakwesi Shandov. Stay.
It's now time for the news. My name is Pakwesi Shandov. Now, a joint technical committee is expected to meet today to review options proposed by the individual bondholders. Now, that's the consensus reached between the Finance Ministry and the bondholders at a meeting on Wednesday. Ghana's individual bondholders fear that the modality, which is an important step in securing the international monetary fund's bailouts, may bring untold economic hardship to the country and could potentially make their bonds worthless. Addressing the media after the engagement, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta said that he was hopeful the work of the technical committee will be positive.
Technical committees, and they will be meeting immediately tomorrow because we don't really want to miss the deadline that we have set. We are confident that we'll get there, but I think in all of us settle down to think about it, it will be good for us. But I think the clarity for all of us that it is a voluntary program. You know, we have anticipated maybe getting up to 80%, which will still put us within the parameter. So we are asking everybody to really join. There may be things we may do to mitigate the impact, and that's what I believe the technical committee will look at. But really, it continues to be a government that cares for people, lives and livelihoods, as we saw in COVID. We protected. Going forward too, we have to protect people, but also ensure that the community of the Republic, crosses the Jordan safely. And that is a challenge we have. I think January 31st is certainly what you may call a drop-dead date. I think we would have given everybody enough time to participate or give us their comments or interest, and we'll do it. But I'm confident that we'll get there. I think we are making good progress with the financial institutions and with other individuals that are concerned. So thanks. This has been a very good meeting.
Now, leader of the individual bondholders, Senyor Husi, believes that their proposals will be adopted by the Joint Technical Committee to bring relief to the individual bondholders.
Forgetting that the rest of Ghanaians are also aspiring to be here. You're also crushing the hope of they also being here. So practically, this has to do with every single Ghanaian. Your chance to win, your chance to thrive, your chance for your aspirations to be realized. We will work together to solve this.
As the technical committee sits, will there be a review of your stance?
Review of our stance. Well, we have asked, look, those who don't really know me, maybe I'll let you know, and you can probably speak to my former constituents. My policy positions are always thought through on a balanced scale. You always have to think about other people and look at what's functional. Like I told the minister, I own businesses that are negatively affected by it. I am an unemployed graduate. And as an unemployed graduate, if my businesses are negatively affected by it, it is a big deal. But considering the challenges he has at hand, I've accepted and authorized my businesses to subject themselves to this DDE. My problem is that you can't extend that to individuals because the implications are catastrophic. If you put it at a bank, you have come up with some forbearances, financial stability fund. You are giving them options. There is no option for your hunger. There is no option for your inability to pay for your dialysis. The option is go a begging. There's no option for all the work you have done to throw your dignity away when it's no fault of yours. What crime have they committed? None.
Meanwhile, 77-year-old retiree Peter Kojo-Nyasepe, who cannot walk unassisted, is worried that he may not survive if government fails to listen to the pleas of individual bondholders and exempts them from the debt exchange program. Peter says that failure to get a coupon would mean death because he cannot afford prostate, diabetes, and high blood pressure medications. Features editor Jojo Kobna caught up with him at his residence in Teshi and now reports.
When I heard that, now, we are not going to get any coupon or any interest until 2027, before they'll give you 5% of your capital. I said, wow. 77-year-old. Now, how many years? That's 5 years or 4 years before 77. How long has God given me?
Peter Kojo-Nyasepe is 77. Currently, his blood pressure is rising due to an investment that was meant to make him smile. He became agitated upon hearing that individual bondholders will be included in a debt exchange program. He lost more than 250,000 cedis in a Ponzi scheme, so this forced him to choose government bonds as a safe investment. He sold his land and bought 2 different government bonds. Yearly coupons have been sustaining him for years. The news that a debt exchange program may prevent him from receiving any coupons upsets him. On January 23, he is scheduled to receive his coupon, but is unsure whether he will.
There is no plan and there's nothing I can sell anymore. And there's nothing I can sell. So the only thing I have decided to do was to go to the bank on the 23rd, to go to the bank there and sit down there. That's all. Because if I go, how am I going home? I have to go home with a car. I need fuel. When I come home I have to pay for the water bill, electricity bill, food. And the money is there in the bank. So I give the money to the Ghana Commercial Bank. So they will give me the money before I come home.
So if you go on 24th and they say there is no money in your accounts?
I'm going to stay there. If they say the money is not there, I'm going to stay there. I'm going to stay there. Until they carry me wherever they want to carry me. Because I cannot walk myself. So they will carry me. Whatever they want to carry me, go. They have to carry me and go. That's the only thing I can. That's the only. I cannot fight them also.
This big bag contains empty boxes of medication that Mr. Peter Kojo-Nyasepe has used over the years. He relies extensively on medication to survive. And so, without government giving him his coupon for this year, it would be very difficult for him to live. He doesn't know where help will come from. He wants the government to know that he has no extra funding to survive, as 2 of his children still live with him. He plans to use the money from his investment to reinforce his weak fence before the rains set in. All these plans will have to be on hold if government fails to listen.
When people tell me that it will be okay, how is it going to be okay? Upon what direction, or upon what structures, upon what foundation, upon what hope is it going to be? When the news came, I cannot sleep. So that this is coming. It's only this. My wife is telling me to cool down. You cannot die. Immediately you want to dose. Then you remember that you have to buy. You are watching your meter. This will go off. You are thinking your meter will go off. So you have to go. You have to go and buy the prepaid. Then you not sleep.
Peter is just one of many individual bondholders who rely on bond investment to survive. They are pleading with government to exempt them.
If I take the money, it's rather I use the money for something which I can either make blocks or bricks or buy something.
With some individual bondholders threatening never to invest in government bonds if they retrieve their money, the government must be intentional and delicate about how the situation is handled. Jojo Kobna, Joy News.
Sad development there. But away from that, Minister for Education, Dr. Yao Edichum, has attributed Ghana's youth unemployment rate to several irrelevant causes run by tertiary institutions across the country. According to him, many of the courses have no use on the job market. Speaking at the 74th Annual New Year School, Dr. Edichum said that the government is collaborating with the universities to correct the said imbalance.
So many students have been enrolled in diploma in education. They are being trained for jobs that do not exist. Thousands and thousands are graduating for jobs that do not exist. One favorite course that I always cite is what is called sanitation education, but there's no course in sanitation to be taught. Development education. Development education for what? UDS. Development studies, undergraduate program. For what job? So yes, I'm fully aware, and we're engaging the universities. I think we need to focus on courses that have relevance to that particular student and to the nation. Invariably, you have BA in education and this university, and it's supposed to prepare students for non-teaching jobs. What type of non-teaching job are you preparing students with BA in education? They don't exist, but the degree program exists. Unfortunately, there's limited guidance and counseling at our schools, at the high school level, for a student to be able to say, I applied to do business administration, you gave me sociology, and I'm not going to take it, because that is not where I'm heading. But invariably, the young men just want to come to the university. We need to change course, because unemployment invariably comes from the fact that we are training the graduates for courses that don't exist.
Protecting yourself during a robbery attack can actually be very tricky. Well, even if you are holding a firearm, there is a likelihood of casualties during a shootout. Fortunately, Guinean engineer Emmanuel Rekubrebe has developed a security robot which can remotely launch a gun attack. Live FM's Kwesi Debra has more for Tech Thursday.
The 4-feet robot, made from plastic waste, is equipped with a surveillance camera, LED light, and a gun. The innovation, called Robot Sniper, has an attempt to ward off the intruder. Mr. Rekubrebe believes his innovation will be crucial for the security services and security-conscious individuals.
To the engine aspect, this is a normal motor that I'm using to control the movement. and then I move to the back here. It's a chargeable system. I charge through solar. And then the other mechanism, when I operate, you see how they change and all that as to how I want it to operate. Actually, I decided to build this particular one to support our security agencies. Sometimes they have to face the risk of standing right in front of bullets, because if you take bank, for instance, the first target will be the security personnel who is there. So it's to help you to hide yourself, actually, and let the system do the monitoring for you. If you sense danger, an alarm will be first sent to the one who wants to break. If he refuses, then the firing continues by way of using the remote. And it can go up and down to actually capture the focus that you want to have your target.
Reporter for JoyNews, Kwesi Deborah.
Now, medical scientists at the School of Medicine and Dentistry at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology have successfully carried out the first implantation of the novel biological heart valve in Africa. The valve, known as the Inspiris Resilia aortic valve, was implanted by a team led by Dr. Isaac Otri from the Department of Surgery. JoyNews' medical correspondent, Dr. Netta Pasram, reports.
The Inspiris Resilia aortic valve is a 3-leaflet valve which has been designed to be resilient. And do you know what? It's made from cow heart tissue.
So we see the shadow of the heart here, and then we see the heart going to be open. It's going to be behind it. And then when you open the heart, that's the valve sitting here like that. This is a disease valve. The normal valve looks thinner than this. This looks thicker. So it's thickened. So it's a disease valve, especially in the environment here. It's actually due to rheumatic heart disease. So this whole valve, with the natural valve, is going to be removed. And when you remove the valve, you have to replace it. And when disease affects these valves, what are the options for us in dealing with them? That will be the challenge for cardiac surgeons for all these years. And therefore, it has been a headache for us. How do we get a material or an artificial valve that can stay or that can be more durable? A bit of a challenge. Currently in cardiac surgery, we have two main types of valves or artificial valves that can be used to replace a damaged valve in the heart. One is a metal, we call it the mechanical valve. The other one is a tissue valve or an animal valve, which are gotten from the valves, gotten from animals like cows and pigs and the rest. What we have realized in the world is that the mechanical valves, if we replace a damaged or a diseased valve with a mechanical valve, because the mechanical valve is a metal, it can lead to complications like clotting and then bleeding, though a metallic valve or a mechanical valve can stay for long. The other valve, which is better in terms of less complication, is what we call a tissue valve, which actually obtained from the valves or the covering of valves of cows or pigs. We call the porcine valves or the bovine valves. But the issue is that if we replace a disease valve in a human being with the tissue valves, which are obtained or manufactured from animals like cows and pigs, as I said, they deteriorate or they get destroyed very early, especially in young people and in Africans. That's what I've been realized. You know, in Africa, we have a young population. You know, most of our patients here are in their 40s and their 50s or in their 30s. And therefore, if we put these tissue valves, which are the animal valves, we put them or implant them in young people in Africans, it's realized that they deteriorate very, very fast because what they call calcium deposition in the valve get destroyed. So it's been a headache for the whole world how we can get a valve that can stay for long, especially in Africans and also especially in young people. And research has gone on. It has taken 12 years of research in the US for them to come up to develop a valve now, which is a tissue valve, not a metallic valve, that is implanted in young people, and that can also be implanted in Africans, that can stay longer. This valve, which is called Resilient valve, was actually, it took 2 years for it to develop that valve in the US. It got FDA approval in 2017, and the first implantation started in 2019. We were fortunate in Kumasi, in Ghana, and Africa, to have the opportunity to have a donation for the electronics from the US, who donated one of these valves to us. In fact, the price of it is right now is almost $9,000 for that valve. They donated for us to try to implant it in Africa. In 2019, we were fortunate, we had some partners from the UK who came and they donated one to us, and I implanted that valve in an elderly woman, an elderly man who was 57-year-old with a very bad disease, aortic valve. And we use the tissue valve here because it's a special one that can stay for long. And the patient need not be on the blood thinner drug, which is the warfarin. That's its own complications. That the major advantage of it is that that particular one that we implanted, the patient need not be on the blood thinner drug called warfarin. And we implanted it, and it went so well, and we have been following this man for the past 3 years. He's doing so well. So we realized that, okay, then we are fortunate to have been the first people in Africa to have implanted this special valve. And we decided to just talk about it, and we have actually gone ahead to publish an experience of the first implantation of this Resilient valve in Africa.
The Bulk Oil Storage and Transportation Company Limited, BOST, has supported 16 schools in the Buipe traditional area in the Savannah region with 19,000 exercise books. Each student is therefore expected to receive 5 of the books. In all, BOST is supporting 54 schools with 100,000 books this academic year. Yes, Martina Bugri's report.
Students who received the books describe the donation as timely. Amidou Shafao is in Form 3. She says she's been using 15 books from her Form 1 to Form 3. Adds that the donation would help her a lot.
For the exercise book, they are not much plenty. So there were 15 that I was using from Form 1 to Form 3. So I've been able to manage to use them from Form 1 to Form 3.
Some of the teachers who received the books on behalf of their schools thanked BOST for the gesture and said it will go a long way to help the students.
Those from the rural areas, especially this school, is full of needy children. So sometimes I have to get learning material, exercise books. It's always a problem because sometimes you'll be giving exercise while people are sitting down. When you ask that they don't have exercise books to write. So we are blessed for this gift.
Let me say the items donated to us have come very timely. We've been yearning for these items since time immemorial to support us in our academic work in the school.
Speaking at the Bupeura's Palace, the manager in charge of corporate social responsibility, Yao Entwidazi, said that supporting education in communities they work is the best offer they can give to these communities.
And so he voted that we should do that for all the communities surrounding our facilities in all our depots. So this is part of the project. We are doing the distribution of 100,000 exercise books to 54 schools. And it's good to know that Bupe has the highest number of schools. We have 16 schools and we are distributing almost 19,000.
The corporate communications manager, Salifunat Achampong, said BOST is currently supporting 8 students from Bupe at the University of Mines, Takwa.
Collected about 8 from Bupe. We didn't want any students from anywhere apart from Bupe.
Oh, wow.
And we did the same thing in Savulugu, all the places that we have facilities. Now, in total, there are about 50. We are taking their 3 years or 4 years engineering degree.
The Bupeura Abdullah Janapo II said the best legacy one can give a child is to offer them education.
Education, to me, personally, education is the best investment any parent can make. Is that the best? And today, all the benefits of our investment, not for us alone, but for the country, for Bukwe, for the country, and the whole world.
It's a wrap on the news this morning. For more, log on to www.myjoyonline.com. My name is Pakwesi Shandoff. The show continues with Benjamin Akakpo and Bernice Lansah. Don't go anywhere.
Thank you for joining us for our news review. Time now for us to get into the papers. And shortly, we'll be joined by the Executive Director of Solidaire Ghana, Benjamin Esuman. He'll be our guest joining us to delve into the issues. But let's start with the papers we have here. Today we have the Daily Graphic, Ghanaian Times Daily Guide, the Chronicle newspaper, and the Business and Financial Times. Well, what does the Daily Graphic have to say this morning? AG bears teeth at tax evaders, warns culprits will face the law. I'm talking about the Attorney General. There's also harnessing after potential. Police, international agencies collaborate to enhance security. That's according to the IGP. Making Ghana Mecca for Pan-Africanism, a hub, so to speak. December in GH boosts tourist arrivals. But there have been some concerns as well on the back of some of the happenings in December and sustainability issues, among others. There's also this picture that is created. Yesterday, I was out and about, and you would realize that a lot of the foreigners who come into the country have a certain perspective, limited perspective, by the way, because they come and they are in the plush hotels or the average hotels. They are going to certain places. I don't want to mention them in order not to advertise any place. And so that is their image of Ghana. But Ghana goes a lot beyond that. The multidimensionally poor are here. The communities without electricity and water are also here. So there's a different side that they don't get to see. And sometimes, yes, every person would like to put his best foot forward. Every country would like to sell itself on its selling points. But are we getting it right in other areas? So that, just imagine, if we were able to get it right even in the touristic centers we have across the country, so many of them littering the length and breadth of our country, yet we are not improving them, we are not bettering them in any way. Up north, so many. Down south, so many. In the middle belt, same. What are we doing with them? So if we really want to go hard on tourism, let's not just wait for December. Do you get my point? Why wait for December when you can milk the industry from January? Anyway, technical team to review individual bondholders' proposal. Let's get into the details of the stories now. And companies that underdeclare their incomes and also use other dubious means to evade taxes will face the full rigors of the law, the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice, Godfrey Adame, has warned. In an exclusive interview with the Daily Graphic last Tuesday, he said tax evasion, avoidance, and under-declaration of income were pervasive in the country, a situation that robbed the state of crucial revenue for development. But of course, we do know that while tax evasion is criminal, tax avoidance is not. So yes, it may be pervasive, but is he hinting at any dynamics to do with our laws and what could change? I think we have a tax evasion problem, quoting him, as a country. Our system of monitoring and even the manner in which accounting is done and how businesses are not captured within the tax net leads itself to tax evasion. He mentioned the legal profession as one industry that was a big culprit of tax evasion. Interesting. Adding that some lawyers collected all sorts of fees without paying taxes on them. While encouraging lawyers to be good citizens and pay taxes in line with their oath, the AG said his office would not hesitate to prosecute any lawyer found wanting for evading tax. To go on further with that story, Mr. Dame said his outfit was collaborating with the Ghana Revenue Authority and other agencies to ensure that companies that shortchanged the country in the payment of taxes were legally made to honor their tax obligations. The collaboration, he explained, involved the Ages Department reviewing and examining tax cases from the GRA, as well as giving legal support to help the GRA effectively discharge its mandate. He explained that when tax assessments were made, usually companies were given time to pay, and that had to do with prosecuting such entities. And he said very soon we'll prosecute other companies no matter how big they are. It is up to the companies to either pay or face prosecution. All right, so there are so many dynamics in there that we can look at. And MTN is also cited in there. And you may have seen that recent story. On January 11 this year, the GRA slapped telecommunications giant MTN with an 8.21 billion Ghana cedi tax liability. The assessment includes penalties and interest charges. Now, the tax assessment followed an audit by the GRA on MTN Ghana for the period 2014 to 2018, using a third-party consultant that we have all come to know now as Safari Tech, using a third-party consultant as well as a new methodology based on call data records, recharges, and other data. But we should also bear in mind, MTN strongly disputes the accuracy and basis of the assessment, including the methodology used in conducting the audit, the company said in a press release on January 13. So that issue is still pending. But just to wrap with this comment, in terms of that Supreme Court decision, the GRA has recently been emboldened in its tax assessments mandate following a Supreme Court decision which affirmed a legal provision that makes it mandatory for taxpayers dissatisfied with a tax assessment by the GRA to pay 30% of the tax before challenging its legality. In a unanimous decision on November 30 last year, the 7-member panel of the Apex Court dismissed the suit filed by one Richard Amohene challenging the constitutionality of the said law. And so those are the latest dynamics there in respect of this matter. Very interesting one, and I look forward to seeing how it will pan out in real terms, in terms of being activated. And I also look at how the MTN issue will pan out. Are we shifting the goalposts? Are we being fair to them? And on the other hand, has the company had any dealings that maybe did not inure to the tax benefits of the country? So this way or that, we'll see what happens. Let's get to our guests now. Okay, so he'll be joining us shortly. Benjamin Isuman, Executive Director, Solidaire Ghana. Let's get into some other stories. Harnessing after potential. Police international agencies collaborate to enhance security, and that is coming from the IGP. The story is on page 13. Now, the Inspector General of Police, Dr. George Ekufu-Dampare, stated that the police are collaborating with regional and continental security agencies to improve security in the country, especially as it hosts the Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area, popularly known, or for short, AFTA. The move is in line with an African Union Peace and Security Council Insight report that indicated that in spite of the potential of AFTA to contribute to economic development, peace and security on the continent, its implementation could be hampered by insecurity. And he was speaking, of course, on the sub-theme Governance, Peace and Security Preparedness for African Continental Free Trade Area. And he said during the review of the service's operational strategy and reflection on public perception, it was found that, quote, most of the public were dissatisfied with the services we delivered. To address the issue, he said the service had formulated and implemented 9 action point initiatives, including enforcing the law without fear or favor, community engagement, leveraging technology to fight crime, police personnel fighting crime with commitment and dedication, dealing with indiscipline and carnage on the road, and serving with respect for the public. I've seen an improvement in this, though, serving with respect for the public, especially some of those that line roads nowadays. You would see them all over, practically at every stop. I've forgotten, they have this name. I'll try to recall and then put it out there. But yes, police visibility, the police visibility teams. And they seem to be doing some good job. but in other aspects, there's still a long way to go. We'll see how that pans out. Well, let's take a look at the story as well by Kester Abram Kranche. Technical team to review individual bondholders' proposal. And we know today there's going to be that confab between some of these bondholders and the Ministry of Finance. So the Ministry of Finance has reached an agreement with the leadership of the Individual Bondholders Forum to have a technical team to review its petition on the government's domestic debt exchange program. The Minister of Finance, Kenneth Ofori-Atta, told the media after a closed-door meeting with the members of the forum that government was open to discussing alternative means of making the DDEP successful. He said the government anticipated 80% participation in the debt swap program after discussions with all the stakeholders. An 80% participation by individual bondholders, he said, would help the government to get into the perimeters of 55% debt to gross domestic product, essential to achieve an IMF deal. The question is, can they get the 80% participation? So far, all the bondholders, many of them have ganged together, so to speak. We've heard from Senor Hosi and his group, who have now latched on to Martin Kpebu and the caucus that he represents. So it's a bit of a stretch. It's a bit of a wonder whether the finance ministry can pull through on this. Some say that without a debt exchange program, our economy is going to be in dire straits, on the ropes. But others also say we shouldn't be paying the price for the sins of those who mismanaged the economy. In the end, though, where should we go? What do we do? Our economy must keep running. And more importantly, we must get that IMF program. How do we get it without debt sustainability? But are we willing to bear the brunt, the pain of doing so? Just before I bring in my guest, I saw a video recently and it really broke my heart. I showed it to some colleagues yesterday about a man who worked in Holland, the Netherlands, by the sweat of his brow, made a bit of money, came, invested it, and this year he's getting practically nothing. He says he invested the money in the banking sector collapse. It sort of was wiped out. Then he felt, look, my money is going to be safe if I go to the nation's bank, the Ghana Commercial Bank. And now, with his sum of money, this is what he has to face. And he was very plaintive, saying, I didn't come begging anyone for money. I can no longer work. I am advanced in age. But what I have worked for, I can't even get anymore. So there are so many dynamics to play with. But let me bring in Benjamin Esuman, Executive Director, Solidaire Ghana. Mr. Esuman, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Ben, and thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure having you join the conversation. Since we're on the bondholders, individual bondholders proposal, what is your take on that matter? So many people have said that, look, this is going to wreck our livelihoods, so to speak. And in some instances, people are going to look at getting full benefits only after, 2034, 10 years plus from now. What's your take on it?
Well, Ben, this is a very sad situation we find ourselves in as a country. As a developing country, you must be conscious to develop the financial sector and the capital market. So people are encouraged as you come out of school and you get a job to learn how to save on the capital market and save such that when you retire or when an eventuality, comes your way, or even when you want to improve on the living conditions that you find yourself, you'll be getting interest on the little investment that you will have made. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in a situation where we are making total nonsense of that advice, that wise counsel that has been given to people, for decades. And so, for somebody to invest and for no fault of his or hers, the government wakes up one morning to say that we are unfortunately not going to give you anything on your investment. There will be no returns. And that we are, as a matter of fact, spreading any gain you will make for 15 years. It's a sad situation. And as heartbreaking as it is, we as a country must be bold enough to tell ourselves the truth. I find it so often that in Ghana, we are always diplomatic in telling the truth to our people. And as a result, we don't get to deal with people, the way people should be dealt with. This morning, I woke up to a news item from New Zealand, where the New Zealand leader of government says that I have no further, goodies in my tank. My tank is empty. I cannot continue as leader of government, so I'm stepping down. I'm not going to run. Being bold enough to tell the people of her nation that I cannot continue in office. Here, we don't find it. Leadership don't retire when they know that they have nothing left for the people. They continue to stay in office when clearly they are underperforming or they are not performing at all.
Right.
So that's where we find ourselves. It's unfortunate, but we must be bold enough to tell ourselves the truth that you have messed up our economy. You have unfortunately run the capital market, into a ditch, and the overborrowing by the government has resulted in a situation where individual, innocent, private, investors on the capital market are now being asked to bear the brunt. But then,
Mr. Suman, let me just find out from you briefly. Do you think that is part of the angst, part of the resistance of people to, right from the e-levy to other bits that we've had to face? People say, look, even when you levy us, you tax us, what do we see by way of results? Do you feel that failure to accept that something wrong was done, which has culminated in where we are, is also part of why some people are digging their heels in and not going along with our government?
Yes, exactly, precisely the situation. Let's look at the situation of New Zealand. If the New Zealand Prime Minister, who today is leaving office, goes ahead to announce that I am providing a 3-year bond facility to the people of New Zealand, the confidence of the people of New Zealand to invest in that bond is high because they know that this is a lady who says that I'm done, I'm leaving, a new guy who is having a lot of modules in his system is coming to take over from me, or must be elected to take over from me. That's the level of transparency and trust building that we needed. And unfortunately, we don't have it now. Right from last year, when the e-levy debate, was at the fore, we have not had that level of confidence and trust in the management of our economy. Look, just this week, we are learning of government giving tax waiver to someone setting up a hotel that's not owned by the government, a hotel that's owned by the private person.
This issue of tax waivers is back, and just to chip in, over the years, it's been so selective from administration to administration. I guess I don't know how we'll deal with that problem. When you're done, maybe you could proffer some solutions.
No, but you see, meanwhile, the argument at the time of e-levy was that we are not raking enough taxes for the country, and therefore people should pay when they are transacting electronic business or electronic financial transactions. They must pay.
Right.
You are asking the Kaya or the woman who is struggling on the street of Accra, who sends 300 Ghana cedis, to the mother in the village in Boko or whatever, to pay e-levy. Meanwhile, you are giving that private investor or businessman, whatever, a tax waiver running into millions of cedis.
Right.
So the government that says that I cannot rake in enough revenue is giving away revenue free of charge to a private person, but rather punishing that young lady who is a kaya in Accra. That is the dichotomy we find ourselves. We are not being able to boldly tell ourselves the truth that this is wrong as a nation and it shouldn't happen again. It shouldn't happen that Ben, who works at multimedia, gets his income, a middle class person decides to save enough after paying his e-levy, save enough to invest on the capital market for a 3-year bond that Ben expects that after 3 years, that he and his wife and his kids must be able to get some returns on it, which he will use to pay the school fees of his son or his daughter. That Ben is now told that, yes, we have taken your money. We promise you with a paper that in 3 years' time, government will give you this amount. However, government is unfortunately not going to give you this amount. He asked why. He said that, unfortunately, government has overborrowed. And because government has overborrowed, it has been locked out of the capital market. And for that reason, government needs to set off part of its indebtedness. How is government going to do that? Okay, in order for government to do the government needs the free space, not to pay you what you deserve.
Right.
After taking your money, it cannot pay you. And therefore, government is getting into a negotiation with you to delay giving
So to move the conversation forward so we can get into other matters, if you were a bondholder or if you had subscribed to an entity that had bonds using your funds, your deposits, would you, in the favor, in the national interest, in light of patriotism, say, go ahead and use my bonds, participate in the domestic debt exchange program, or would you have said, no, it is my money and I'm not going to, I don't want my money to be involved? So two things, patriotism, the national interest, as has been put forth, and personal interest on the other hand. Mind you, the finance minister has said that it is not obligatory, it is optional to partake in it. But of course, there could be consequences if you don't partake in it.
But Ben, those who are asking the public to be patriotic must themselves show patriotism.
Right.
If those who are asking us to be patriotic have taken the bold step that this year the government is expecting to spend over nearly 110 billion, and we are having to set off about 50 billion of our indebtedness, and for which reason we are asking for a debt exchange program. Why can't the government itself reduce its expenditure for the year?
Right.
In order to allow the government itself have that space, that freedom to then come and say that we are looking for 50 billion to be set off. I've been able to set off, say, 30 or 40 billion. It left with 10 billion. Let's now discuss it with the banks.
So it's a fair point.
It's
a fair point you have. But just before we move on, and that also resonates with our latest budget statement, for example. You look at the deficits just keep getting bigger. And even as we're going for an IMF program, even as we are on the economic ropes, guess what? Our deficit is going to be about 61.4 billion. That's what our deficit is looking like. So we're increasing our deficit, we're increasing spending in some areas. How then do we, tighten the rope and get what must be secured? Let me just do
that. There's a story in the Bible where the prophet told David that there's a man who had a head of sheep. When he got a visitor, he decided not to kill any of his sheep. He decided to go for the man who had just one goat in his house, to go and kill that goat for the visitor. The government is sitting on a lot of waste. The government is protecting the wastage in the system.
Right.
But it's asking that private citizen out there, that ordinary investor, Ben, for Ben to take the bullet, while the government is not taking any bullet. We are still seeing the convoys being run by government officials in town. We are still seeing them. We see how fat they are living. We are still seeing the holes in the system. We are still seeing how wasteful they are in government.
So I think the point is clear.
The presidential staffers who must be cut down, the number must be cut down in order to save the taxpayers some money. We are still seeing it. We are not seeing any bold steps to reduce the government expenditure in order for us to all cooperate.
And that is the question. And that analogy there from the Bible, I think it was the prophet Nathan speaking to David in that incident. But let's just do this. Making Ghana Mecca for Pan-Africanism. December in Ghana boosts tourist arrivals. Now, tourist arrivals in the country for December last year rose by 16.37% to 98,873, showing a strong recovery from the heady days of the COVID-19 pandemic. Using data from the Kotoka International Airport, the Ghana Tourism Authority said the highest tourist arrivals for the month of December in recent times had been 116,438 international arrivals from all entry points in 2019, a feat achieved due to the year of return. However, the numbers declined in 2020 to 43,645. Subsequently, in 2021, the numbers picked up by 94.67% to 84,965, and now it has shot up again. So the GTA attributed the uptake in interest arrivals largely to its December in Ghana initiative. On the back page of the Daily Graphic, Bolgatanga Regional Hospital cries for dialysis center. And when it comes to some of these, I get heartbroken. Yes, every country would want to provide some of these equipment so that people can have access to them, and sometimes they can be subsidized. Imagine having, some of these illnesses, diabetes and the rest, and getting to the point where you need dialysis from time to time. You have kidney issues, and there's simply no access. Even when you're getting it here, it's so expensive. Then consider maybe having to go to other countries, South Africa and all of that. And we're already a hub for medical tourism, so to speak, in the sub-region. So if we don't have it, then it means that your options are very limited. We keep talking about health this and health that and Agenda 111, and we're building this, but these are crucial areas. I think sometime, I've forgotten whether it was last year or two, a lot was done in the UK, for example, when it comes to these things. But here, we see money being pumped into certain enterprises that don't see the light of day, and it gets problematic sometimes. We'll try to reconnect with Benjamin Esuman, but the Ghanaian Times very quickly says this morning, at UAE Business Forum, Ghana targets net zero emissions as it employs climate-friendly technologies and practices in mining. PAC orders arrest of 3 guarantors for guaranteeing for workers who breached bond conditions. DDE program brouhaha. Finance Ministry individual bondholders strike deal agreed to set up technical committee to address concerns. And Asin North MP files motion for review of Supreme Court ruling. So let's go to page 11 and pick those two stories there. The President, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, says the government would collaborate with stakeholders around the world to explore Ghana's mineral resources in an environmentally friendly manner for national development. Mr. President, environmentally friendly. I'm glad you're saying that, but in reality, especially under your tenure, we've lost a lot from our forest reserves, our forest cover, and what Galamsey has done to us. It is good that you're saying this. I heard you, as well at COP27, but Mr. President, we must really get beyond the talk and protect what is ours, especially for future generations. But the rest of the story, he said the government would not only mine the minerals to boost export earnings, but add value along the minerals value chain with other sectors of the economy. Addressing the UAE Ghana Business Forum held on Tuesday on the sidelines of the Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week, President Akufo-Addo described mining as a key pillar of Ghana's economy and invited UAE investors for partnership. Let's go to that story of the Asin North MP. Lawyers of the Member of Parliament for Asin North constituency, James Ejechikweson, have filed a motion seeking the Supreme Court to review its November 22, 2022 ruling that dismissed a certiorari application filed by the MP. Mr. Chachu Chikata, the lead counsel for Mr. Quayson, went to the Supreme Court to challenge the decision of the Accra High Court, where the Attorney General is conducting criminal proceedings against his client. In July 2022, Mr. Chikata raised a preliminary legal objection and questioned the competence of the first prosecution witness, Richard Techimensa, but the trial High Court judge, Justice Mary Mami Eku, overruled the objection, noting that the witness was competent to give testimony. So the latest in there, another motion filed for a review of that Supreme Court ruling. On the back page, Black Galaxies face Sudan in make or break affair. And the Galaxies have their destinies in their own hands when they face the Secretary Birds of Sudan in a bubble or burst affair at the ongoing African Nations Championship in Algeria. Welcome back, Mr. Suman. Let's quickly get into the rest of the papers. Exempt small bondholders, NPP to government. There's also woman hangs son and self, and arrest Ahmed Suale killers, GJA demands. Let's start with that story. I've been seeing Ahmed Hussein Suale trending for a while now. So the Ghana Journalists Association has called on the security agencies to expedite action on efforts being made to arrest the killers of Ahmed Hussein Suale, an investigative journalist in the employ of Tiger Eye Private Investigation, who was assassinated 4 years ago. Ghana, for 4 years ago. According to the GJA, in a statement issued yesterday, signed by Albert Kwabena Jumfor, president, it was, quote, saddened by the deafening silence and lack of action by the state authorities responsible for law enforcement to bring the perpetrators of Ahmed Hussein Suale's murder to book. And just to top up, exempt small bondholders, both stories on page 3 of the Daily Guide newspaper. National executives of the ruling New Patriotic Party have appealed to the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta to grant exemptions to small bondholders in the ongoing debt exchange program announced by the government last year. General Secretary of the NPP, Justin Kodua Frimpong, said the party wants bondholders like pensioners to be excused from the program, calling on the government to find alternative ways for the DEP. Okay. So that is the situation there. Of course, we know the pensioners as a group have pulled themselves out, and now individual bondholders are on the chopping block. Mr. Suman, quick reflections on these two stories in about 30 seconds, if you can. You would have to unmute, Mr. Suman.
Oh.
Okay, I think you're on. I can hear you now. I can hear
you. As somebody who used to be in the Inky fraternity, I feel a bit attached to what happened to Ahmed Suale. If I decide to go through the motions of a young man who's trying to do his best to expose rot in the system, and having successfully done so, and he having been marked, on TV and all that as a target for attack,
right?
And he having been murdered, and 4 years after that, the police have not been able to crack this particular case. We have heard, somebody like Honorable Kennedy Japan say that he had been told by the former CID boss, Ken Yeboah, he's now retired. Ken Yeboah retired last year, that they have found the person. The police have found the person who was behind the murder.
Right.
And yet, to date, there is no police invitation to Honorable Kennedy Japan to come and explain what Ken Yeboah told him. Ken Yeboah has retired, he's gone home, and he has never been invited by the police. The police have not issued a statement that we are following up on what our former CID director told the honorable member of parliament. It's unfortunate. Right. It's unfortunate. But this case shouldn't have been a cold case. Unfortunately, we are getting it to become a cold case, and the police are not able to crack it. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
Thank you so much, Mr. Suman. We don't have more time to interact, but I just want to do these very quickly. The Chronicle, horror. Lady hangs herself and son. A young lady believed to be in her mid-20s has allegedly hanged her 5-year-old son and later hanged herself. The incident occurred in an uncompleted building at Adria Mantem near Adwa, a fishing community in the Ahanta West municipality. Now, it is not known why the young lady, whose identity is not known, decided to end her life together with her son, but information available indicated that the lady and the son, who do not hail from the community, were on Tuesday this week spotted at Adwa community begging for alms. And that gives you some sort of hint of why this could happen. The BNFT, producer inflation records huge decline to 52.2% in December 2022, and electricity tariffs should be lower, IES argues. Well, that's how we sew it up. We've been with Executive Director of Solidaire Ghana, Benjamin Esuman, who joined us for that conversation. Thank you so much, Mr. Esuman, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Ben.
Well, right before we get into sports, it's the grand finale of the Ghana Science and Tech Explorer Prize Challenge. 50 schools from Greater Accra and the Ashanti regions are ready to showcase the prototype products aimed at solving societal challenges. Which team, though, will emerge winner of the G-Step Challenge? The finals will be held at the Accra International Conference Center. The date is Wednesday, the 25th of January, 2023. The time is 3 p.m. sharp. There will also be an exhibition by our young ones as they seek to provide solutions to the myriad problems in our environment. Make a date with us and be part of the first ever award ceremony to reward our future innovators and inventors. G-Step Challenge is organized by Dream Oval and supported by Foundation Bortner and Joy Prime. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying. Up next, all the action in sports.
Good morning. AM Sports here with me, Muftau Nabila Abdullah, the Minister of Youth and Sports. Mustafa Yusuf has hinted that a new Black Stars coach is close to being appointed by the Ghana Football Association. According to him, the FA is expected to present a final report to his ministry on who they have decided on to replace former coach Otto Addo.
After the World Cup, countries that lost their head coach have made efforts of replacing them. And you've mentioned countries like Portugal, France, and they've even renewed. Some of them contracts have been renewed. In Ghana, the FA, which is the agency or the organization in charge of making sure that they hire a coach, is in the process. And I personally have engaged them, and they are working to, as at last week, the indication was that they will bring the final report to the ministry, possibly this week or next week. And because I also know that we have an assignment in March, and we need to have a replacement of head coach in place so that he can start preparing in earnest to get our team in place for the AFCON qualifiers, which is going to take place in March. So countries should be assured that the FA is working to ensure that we get a replacement.
Mustafa Yusuf was speaking before the Public Accounts Committee, and let's still there and talk about the National Sports Authority Director General, Professor Peter Chumesu. He has been speaking about staff who were interdicted for their various roles in the football corruption captured by investigative journalists. Anas Almeyer announced in his number 12 expose done about 5 years ago. Many of the staff are still being paid salaries despite their interdiction. 4 staff members, including a former Director General, Robert Safo Mensah, Ashanti Regional Director Joshua Mensah, the Public Relations Officer, Frederica Davis, and the Protocol Officer were interdicted for accepting what Anas and his team described as bribes. 4 years on, the police CID are yet to make their investigations into the matter known, leaving the interdicted staff in limbo. The story, however, took a different turn at the Public Accounts Committee hearing on Tuesday when the current Director General, Professor Peter Chumesu, failed to provide some documents requested by the members.
Some of them were exonerated, others were found culpable. This particular individual was part of those to be investigated. And to date, we haven't received a report on him from the investigation. We've done a number of follow-ups at the police service, who also confirmed to us that indeed they are investigating the officer, but then it was commissioned, the investigation was commissioned by the presidency, so they will submit their report there, which we did a number of writings through our sector ministry to the presidency for the report to be issued, so that we will know whether the person is found guilty for us to be acted on it or is to be reinstated. Till date, we haven't received such a finality, and it has been a challenge for us indeed, officer who is
on your own. So what you're telling me is that even beyond this period, he's being paid. Where are we?
So on interdiction, he gets 50% of his salary.
I think you are shirking your responsibility. In fact, I am of the opinion that you have the right to make a determination regardless of what the presidency might come up with. And I really think that after 2 years, you're not being fair to this gentleman, especially if he's innocent.
In fact, a number of times we have written.
When was the last time?
Last year, but I can't confirm the actual date.
To them?
Yes.
To the police?
Yes, we have a number of.
Do you have a copy of that letter?
Chairman, we will furnish you with some of these correspondence and the petitions that we gathered over this period.
Have you really written to the police? You knew you were coming to answer questions on this particular issue. Why didn't you bring the necessary correspondence? Because see, if it was you who have been on half salary for 3 years, I'm sure you would have taken some action.
Those letters you say you've written to the police.
Yes.
Can you give us a copy?
That is what I indicated to the chairman, that I'll make them available because...
Sir, what did you think you were coming here to do? Didn't you know that you have been cited for these items? Then you come and sit here in presence of the committee, you tell us that you bring it later on. Did you think you were coming here for us to ask you how you were doing?
Let's talk about the African Nations Championship happening in Algeria tonight. Ghana will come up against Sudan in the make-or-break tie in their second Group C clash. The Black Galaxies suffered a 2-1 defeat to Madagascar in their opening match. Coach Anwar Walker has hinted that there could be possible changes to his starting lineup, having said minor mistakes cost his side in the first match.
Madagascar, last Sunday, we lost in a painful defeat, which have worried us so much. Next game, and like you are saying, it's a must win. We also know it's a must win, else we will not be with ourselves. So tomorrow we are going into this game with all that we can to win the match. We lost a game that we never thought of losing. So the other time I told you we're going back, watch the video, then see where we fall short, where the mistakes are, why we were able to concede 2 goals should enter into our goal, which we have done from Monday up to yesterday evening. We were seeing individual mistakes and collectively what went wrong. This is a press conference which I cannot disclose what we have seen and how we're going to approach our game tomorrow. All I say is we are going in with a different mentality and to win the match. As a coach, since something went wrong, I will definitely make changes. But I don't think it will be much. Maybe just 1 or 2 changes.
Let's hear from Galaxy's midfielder, David Abakna, who says the team must play to their strength since they do not know what the opponents will be presenting.
I think sometimes when you get the opportunity to look at your opponent, it gives you a fair idea of what kind of approach to take. But in our situation where we haven't really seen them, what is important for us is to learn our strategy and focus on executing it to the very best. We have done that quite so well. The feeling in camp with the boys. We are back to training and staying focused for the game. We are prepared, mentally we are focused. We know the chances that we have going into this game. We know that it's a difficult one. We know what will happen if we don't win. And we know that we need to win for us to have a chance. I think this recognition is enough for us to want to stay focused and go out there and execute whatever plans that our technical team has planned out for tomorrow's game.
This is our wrap-up AM Sports here with me, Muftau Nabila Abdullah. Benjamin Akakpo returns with the big stories.
Well, welcome back on the AM show. We talk about the Domestic Debt Exchange Program, the DDEP, and where we have come to. We are at a crossroads, basically. We're getting the latest on government's DDE, and a joint technical committee is expected to meet later today to review options proposed by the individual bondholders. Well, that's the consensus reached between the Finance Ministry and the individual bondholders at a meeting at the Finance Ministry on Wednesday, that is yesterday. We've got that on our menu now as we interact with Professor Lord Mensah, lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School. Prof, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. Hello, Professor Mensah. Please unmute.
Yes, good morning, and good morning to our listeners.
Right. So today we're having that technical committee-initiated meeting between the bondholders and the Ministry of Finance. But let's start with the path to getting here. It's been said that government has been pretty opaque in its dealings in letting people know what exactly is going to be a part of this process. And now we have, like we've been discussing, another push when it comes to the deadline day. The last time we interacted, I think you mentioned that you suspected the deadline would be moved again. Is that correct?
Yes, but from the way things were going, I knew definitely what the finance minister is looking out for, which is the debt exchange. Within that shortest possible time, I mean, it's going to be difficult because the investor identification was quite problematic. I wouldn't say the exercise was opaque. More or less, it's an exercise that you need engagement. You need to identify the investor properly. But it's unfortunate, you know, the finance minister and then the economic team identified only those who have contractual agreement with them, and more or less ignoring those who are investing indirectly through financial institutions and, you know, those direct individual investors. So clearly, it has to do with getting used to the investor space and get to know who the investors are. And it is an exercise that, you know, parties who are involved must, you know, accept and must come to agreement before, you know, you can get your headway. And so I knew very well that obviously we're going to have an extension of the deadline.
So when you look at the process so far, have we crossed the T's, dotted the I's, and what would this meeting, expected meeting today, do? What are your expectations?
So this was supposed to be, you know, the procedures from the beginning. I think it was ignored. Like I said, the investor identification was quite problematic for those who are going through the exercise, and probably the consultant who handled the whole issue. I believe that from now on to maybe 31st, now that there's an engagement, the level where the investor has been identified, and we are fortunate to have the investors clustered already, especially the individual investors that government have been dealing with. Now they're going, you know, to all together. So effectively, it will make the negotiations easier. And so I think we are more or less about 70% through to get, you know, this exercise done.
About 70% through. But again, yeah. Looking at how far the process has come, yes, engagement is being brought to bear now. But what have we missed in there? Because look, some of them are intransigent, so to speak. We look at the caucus represented by Martin Kpebu, for example, and they are saying we're going to the confab, but we're not shifting our position in any way. You've heard from Senor Hosi and his group as well. In fact, they've banded together. So some would ask, this entire exercise, it may be some sort of exchange, which is good, but do you suspect it would bear any real fruit? Mind you, as we are all aware, the pensioners mooted that they not go down this road, and the finance ministry pandered to them. The individual bondholders are saying, well, we're going down that same road, and they are going hard. Do you think anything would change?
I think it has to do with the language that is being tossed around. I mean, sometimes you hear the finance minister talking about an exercise that is voluntary. I mean, if it's an exercise that is voluntary, then you don't have to stress yourself out convincing investors to buy into it. It is an exercise that has an economic target, and the target must be met. I think the individual investor community is shocked, for two reasons. The first reason is that the levels of interest rate that is being put on the table in terms of the exchange is not normal. It's out of the norm or the dynamics that we see in our environment. Because if you take the Ghanaian environment, we've never seen 0% interest rate before. Even the whole world, you can only get that in Japan. And then 5%, which is a single-digit, interest rate. This is not normal to a typical investor in the Ghanaian environment. So the investor, i.e., in this case, we are talking about the individual investors, is in a shock. Another thing, too, is more or less an exercise where, government is shifting the sacrifice to only investors. And for that matter, these individual bond investors are calling for that burden sharing, a situation where the government will also sacrifice, part of the entire exercise. So it has to do with borrower-creditor, sacrifice to have a successful, I would say that, yes, for two reasons that, these investors are shocked. So if the finance minister and his team are able to come up and crunch the numbers very well, and then sometimes reduce how hard they want to go on those investors, because, the sacrifice investors are making as a result of the targets the entire exchange wants to achieve. So if you soften the target a bit, and I know very well that it is an exercise that if they get about 80% of the 137 billion, they should deem it, a successful, exercise. And then also, at what speed do they want to achieve the target? If they want to achieve the target within the next 2 years, which will go with a political, cycle, then obviously they will put too much burden on, those who are involved or the investors who have put their money with the government. They may have to sacrifice, those 0% and 5% that, government is proposing. But then, if government softens its stance and then say, okay, fine, our target is 137, but then the speed at which we want to achieve it has to go with economic lines. Then in that case, the 137 can be achieved in the next 5 years, in the next 6. In that regard, the burden that will be shifted to the investor will be reduced. And that is when you see a revision on the 0%, interest rate that was promised. And then the 5% and possibly even the 10% come up a bit closer to what the investor was expecting. And in that regard, I think we should be able to get, this exercise done.
Now, when you look at that technical team that has been set up to review the individual bondholders' proposal, mention is made, the finance minister has said openly that about an 80% buy-in would be required for us to go through with this. And he has also said that it is not obligatory for everybody to come on board. But we also know that if you don't come on board, there could be consequences, so to speak, moving on. Are we in step to get to that 80%? Because, and we'll look at a breakdown shortly of the different dynamics, industry players, the individual bondholders. The pensioners are already out. But from where you sit, do you think we can get 80% buy-in?
Oh, yeah. If you look at the breakdown clearly, we should be able to get it, depending on what, the revision will come up with. And I believe if it comes up closer to what investors are expecting, they will buy into it. It's an exercise that Ghana needs. It is an exercise that if we don't get it, creating that fiscal space for economic, management will be, very, very difficult. So I believe that if the revision comes up with, an offer that will be close to the investors' expectation, it should be able to satisfy them, and they will get an 80% buy.
Prof, just hold for me. Let me also bring in Senor Hosi, who has been very outspoken in terms of bringing these matters to the fore, and he's been getting sentiments from other bondholders. In fact, he has a group that has joined itself with Martin Kpebu's caucus now. Mr. Hosi, a very good morning to you, sir. Hello, Senor.
Yeah, hello. I can hear you.
Great. Thank you for joining the conversation, sir.
Pleasure, mine.
Today we have that meeting with the Finance Ministry on the individual bondholders. Finally, there's going to be some traction coming to the conversation. How expectant are you that you will get some positives out of this meeting? Because so far, from what we've heard from your end, your point is simple. You don't want to partake in this program. What are your expectations?
Well, it's a technical meeting, so it will be a group of technical minds, economists, financial analysts, for us to work out what is sustainable. We have reviewed government's challenges, and we hold the opinion that the problem and the solution actually sits within the fiscal space. Ben, if government today says that I'm going to live my life as it was last year, I'm still going to keep my capital expenditure at the levels I used last year. My salaries at the levels I used last year. As a matter of fact, government will be reducing its deficit or will be saving on this expenditure about 55 billion Ghana cedis. How much is government looking for to solve this problem? It's looking at restructuring a debt of what? 138. So if you really want to save interest burden, you could actually also look at saving other parts of your entire budget. And that itself can give you 54 billion, much more than the DDE can save you in 2023. Means that technically your savings over a 2.5-year cycle will cover this, and you should be out. But it also comes at a political cost, in that government may have to take certain decisions. Either look at downsizing its size, or just maintaining its size without making material shifts in salaries. It also means that government would have to be very modest about its capital expenditure. But bear in mind, last year's capital expenditure is maybe, I think, the second highest in the history of Ghana.
Right.
So keeping that level in itself was never a bad idea. But we see government trying to rather get expansionary, looking at increasing its capital expenditure, which is a discretionary expenditure, by about 12 billion. So there are actually so many ways to deal with this problem. All right? There are also issues on the revenue side, where government's own efficiency in tax revenue generation will have to be looked at.
Right.
I'll give you a case in point. Government and the GRA started this VAT invigilation. We had Reverend Amishadai, the Commissioner General, saying that in some places, taxes increased by 1,000%. It tells you we have so much tax evasion. So why don't we deepen these things, but rather take politics, and then government itself says, cancel it because I'm getting too much agitation from tax evaders? Does that make sense? Think about it. There's a total need for a reset in our thinking amidst this entire crisis.
So in other words...
And it will be quite a disaster that government does not leverage this crisis to fix our governance frame, where people think that because I contributed to your party election,
I'm now entitled to break your rules, break your laws, evade taxes, and when you try and ensure that you try and put in efforts to recover my taxes, I will shout, and you say, please let them go. This is not the time to let any people go. The people you let go are the individual bondholders and collective scheme investors who give you their savings, not tax evaders. So there are too many things that would have to be done. But it needs government
in respect of that, Mr. Hosi, even today, if you take a look at the Daily Graphic newspaper, you would see the Attorney General, Minister of Justice, Godfrey Diabouaname, talking about some of these, even extending it not just to tax evaders, but tax avoiders, which legally speaking is not criminal, and mentioning that even the biggest entities, when they are caught in the web, they will have to face the law, citing even lawyers. But let's look at, you seem to say that we don't want to be a part of this. What are the alternatives? What are the alternatives you're going to be proffering?
We just don't want to. We don't find the basis for us being a part of it.
You don't find what?
Government was asking for an 80% participation of eligible bonds. Individual bondholders and collective investment schemes account for just about 11%. So it means you don't need these people. But now look at the other big. But
Senor,
hold on, let me finish.
Hold on. You say that you constitute some 11% and you say they are not needed.
Let me finish this point. Yeah, Ben. When you take the other pie, there is a structured industry. And there are structured interventions to cushion the impact of this program on them. Like the banks, like the insurance companies. They are putting in financial stability funds. They are putting in revisions in their liquidity ratios. They are putting revisions in their cash reserves. That increases their liquidity for them to recover. There is no recovery for your inability to do your dialysis when you are not getting your money. There is no recovery for you as an individual, for you to go to buy your land that you have saved money that you have to build now. By the time you get your money, the land is now 10 times the price. There's no backup plan for you to miss your education that you have saved. You can't tell your children to wait for 15 years before you can actually fund the education you plan for them. There's no backup for the individual, but there's a backup for almost everybody else. That's why we see this is where it hits the harshest. This is where it hits and hurts the most. You don't touch that. But to solve your problem, we are willing to work with you. There are ways we can work together to win together as a country. But it starts with you taking some more responsibility.
Thank you for making that point. So you say this is where it hurts the most. Two things I want to say to you, Mr. Hosi. This is where it hurts the most. Anyone who is going to be involved in this debt exchange program is going to experience some hurt. So you're not going to be left alone. You're going to be in very good company. The other bit to mention... Hold on.
Because we don't have any backup like other people do.
Right. The pensioners felt they would also be getting the brunt or the short end of the stick, which is why they opted out. But when you look at the firms and institutional bondholders, you would see that we're talking some 34.73 billion, constituting about 25.3%. And yours, as individuals, is 11%. We must get to at least 80%. To meet the IMF's requirements for debt sustainability.
It is also not the case, please.
What is not the case?
We should educate the public pretty well.
Okay, so let me make this point before you come in.
IMF has not told you to do 80%. They've asked you to come with a sustainable plan. That's all they've asked.
A sustainable plan.
The government wants to go this aggressive. So
the finance minister
to revise your aggression.
Mr.
And
Hosi,
you must also do that looking at readjustments in your fiscal structure, i.e. government should revise its expenditure. And optimize its revenue. It can do that as an alternative to this harsh process.
Those are fair points.
There must be some process of burden sharing.
Right.
We can all relate to that.
So those are fair points, but Mr. Hosi, the finance minister has said that to give us that cushion as a country, 80% is the minimal. If you look at Jamaica...
That's the finance minister.
Yes,
is there.
But he is at the helm of affairs of our economy.
No. You see...
And he is managing this.
It doesn't make him God. That is why he's open and kind enough and very cooperative. Our engagement yesterday was fantastic. Guys, we are supposed to work together as a team.
Right.
Let's sit down together, judge and see what alternatives we have. These are our initial ideas. That's how policy is properly sustained and built. So I really love the minister's approach following yesterday's meeting. He's not purporting to be the sole repository of wisdom and knowledge. He's saying, guys, we are open. Let's discuss and look at the issues and see how best we can manage it. You may also have some great ideas. And that openness is what we need to have for us to sustain policy in our country. So I commend Ken Ofori-Atta for that. So it's not the case that we necessarily have to do this level of aggressive, DDE. There may be a revision to it that can be more sustainable for us as an economy.
All right.
Government, if you study the budget pretty well, and you study this entire policy well, you realize that government primarily wants to create enough fiscal space for it to embark on its own legacy goals within the next 2 years. But it is a fair goal to achieve, but don't do it at the expense of people's sustainability when you are out of office.
Okay. Just hold for me briefly. Let me bring in Martin Kpebu, your colleague on the other end, who is also fighting for same. Mr. Kpebu, good morning. If you can hear me, Mr. Martin Kpebu, a very good morning to you. All right. Please unmute. Please unmute for me, Mr. Kpebu. Please.
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning.
Right. I can hear you now. I can hear you now, loud and clear. We've been talking about the debt exchange program. I mean, we've interacted with you for a while now on the same bit. I heard you yesterday talk about the fact that, look, we are not going to shift positions on this. We are not going to change our positions. And the question was posed to you about why then you are partaking in this entire enterprise. So I know you will be there today in full force. What are you going to be suggesting to government on the debt exchange program?
Okay, Mr. Akakpo, and the two groups, we've merged them. So we are presenting a unified front, right? So we are together. Now, secondly, what we are presenting to government is the cutting down of the expenditure, right? Look in the budget and suggest to government cut to free up space for government to exempt individual bond holders. That's the whole business. That's the plan we sold to Ken Ofori-Atta, and he bought it. You know, prior to had been saying it over and over, the whole public accepted that government had.
The connection to Mr. Kpebu is not too good. Mr. Kpebu, if you can hear me, we're going to raise you on the phone so we can have better fluidity when it comes to what you're trying to say. So we can grasp what exactly you have to share with us on this beat. As we wait to get Mr. Kpebu back, let me just bring in Professor Mensah briefly. So you've heard the bit about the 80% as proposed by Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta and Senor Hosey's rebuttal that, look, we actually don't need 80%. I've heard everything from 55% and upwards. What is the reality from where you sit?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that the budget as we see now is a budget that can accommodate this debt exchange. The reason why I'm saying this is that if you look at the budget deficit that has been created, which is a 65 billion. If we should keep all things in equal, where will government get the financing from? There's nowhere the government can get the financing from anywhere.
You're talking of the deficit of some 61.4 billion.
Yes.
Right.
The deficit of about 65 billion.
Right.
Yes. Government cannot get a financing from anywhere. So the budget in itself, I mean, needs a revision. I do agree with that. Because we can't go externally to go and borrow. We've been priced out of the market. And then if you look at the local market, clearly you realize that with this, debt exchange going on, government cannot get any long-term financing from here. And so we may be tempted to use treasury bills, which is being done now, to finance, some of this budget deficit. And it's quite risky. Because if you are using treasury bills to finance, capital expenditure, then we don't know the kind of economics, you are running. So effectively, it tells you that, yes, indeed, we need a revision for the budget, which will accommodate the entire, debt exchange. Now, the target of 137 billion, which the government is looking at for about 80%, well, it may be quite aggressive, and if we should soften it a bit, it should be able to bring, the interest rate or the proposed coupons that government will put on the table to a compromise level.
You say soften it a bit and maybe compromise. To what extent? About what percentage do you feel would suffice below the 80%?
Well, until I get the numbers in front of me, I can't be specific on the the percentages. But let me tell you one thing: if you want to achieve 137 within 2 years, which will go with the political, cycles, why don't you spread it and say you want to achieve the 137 in the next, 5 years? So probably your target of 137 within the 2 years is what is making up the 0% 2023, 5%, 2024, and then 10% thereafter. But then if you extend it to 5 years, you may end up doing about possibly 15%, this year, and then, maybe 10% the next year as, it goes on.
Right.
So effectively, it has to do with the speed at which the target needs to be achieved. And if the government should revise this speed, it should be able to help, all of us.
So now, very briefly, I want to bring in Mr. Kwebu, but very briefly.
Let me chip in this. Let me chip in this. You see, if you look at the proposal now as it stands, it's not investor friendly in a sense that an investor who has never experienced a single digit, interest rate before, if you put 0% and the next year you put 5%, that investor is going to be in shock. So why don't you front load, this interest payment and say that, well, I can pay you, maybe 10%. Let's assume that the current structure is what we are accepting.
Right.
10% this year, 10% next year. And then the investor will have enough space to plan with that 10%, sequence that he's receiving. And then end up, receiving that 0% or 5%. But I'm not saying that is the ideal percentages that the finance minister must come up with. After the review, whatever the case may be, the review should be in such a way that the investor will be in comfort in a way, because it's an exercise that even much of the exercise to bring back the economy, you still need an investor. So effectively, we may have to look at, the sequencing of the interest structures.
Thank you for that brief comment. Let me bring Martin Kwebu back on the line. You were making a point, sir.
Yeah, so I mentioned that the business of the committee is to look at ways of suggesting to government to cut down on the expenditure for this year, so that space can be freed up, so that that's, in other words, money made available to pay the bondholders. And let's not even forget, these bondholders, some of the bonds, for Dachi bond and the ESLA bonds, there's already a certain constant stream of income. So let's say the Dachi bond, that's 2.5% of the VAT that we pay. So any item that attracts VAT, our phones, laptops, etc., there's 2.5% for Get Fund. So that money is used to retire the Dachi bond because they borrowed in order to do educational infrastructure. So the point is that there's already money for the Dachi bond because every day in, day out, we are shopping, buying items that attract VAT. Then number two, when it comes to the ESLA bond, ESLA is energy sector levy. We pay a tax on the fuel that we buy.
Hello, Martin. Hello, Martin.
So there's no need to say that this year there can be no pay.
It appears the connections to Martin Kwebu are problematic this morning, but he was making the point about some of the areas where we can actually bring to bear some cuts feed into the sums of money we need to bring ourselves to sustainability levels, so we don't have to maybe go down this very painful route that we have adopted. But just to wrap quickly with you on these very points, Professor Mensah, before I go back to Senor Hosi, the mention has been made, you said that the proposal as it stands is not investor friendly. Then you went on to speak about the T-bills, using them to finance capital expenditure. From that angle, because if you look at the document as it's been presented by government, the finance ministry, on this DDE, we know that some mention is made of that gray area of treasury bills that they could be roped in. So how risky is it for those with treasury bills, though for now they are not in the picture? You would have to unmute, Professor Mensah.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. Can you hear me, please?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Well, I think the finance minister, was emphatic yesterday that treasury bills are not going to be roped in. Let me tell you the reasons behind it. For economic reasons, it will not be ideal to put in, treasury bills.
Professor Mensah, you know why I'm bringing this up, right? Pensioners were in there. They had to fight to get out. We were told individual bondholders would not be in there. They are fighting to get out of it.
So the likelihood of treasury bills being roped in is very high now.
The what?
Is that what? The likelihood of treasury bills being roped in is very high. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, I mean that along those lines.
Yes. So what I'm saying is that treasury bills will not be, part of it, because if you look at it clearly, and the finance minister was emphatic on it yesterday, that treasury bills are not going to be part of it. But if you look at it clearly, for economic reasons, you don't have to rope in treasury bills. In a sense that treasury bills serves as operational source of funds for the government. So even if you are looking at, long term, you may need to leverage on the treasury bills inflows, to think about, long term. So effectively, that's going to be a no-go area. If treasury bills is touched on, then trust me, the economy is completely grounded. So I know very well that treasury bills will not be touched. But then what is tempting, in a sense that with the current state of the budget we find ourselves in, as I mentioned earlier, the 65 billion that has been declared as a deficit, government cannot finance it anywhere. So indirectly, government is running a zero deficit budget, more or less, almost zero deficit budget, in a sense that the debt exchange that the government is doing now, that is what is going to create that kind of, financing, in space of what? The 65 billion that has been, it's more or less, the budget in itself is a zero deficit budget, as I see. Even if it's not zero, we are looking around somewhere, 7 billion deficit, which is within the 5% that, that has been proposed indirectly. Because that 65 billion cannot be financed in the local market, neither can it be financed from the international market.
Right.
So the only way you can fill in, that gap is to get a free space in your interest payment. And that is why government is trying to push, for this, debt exchange. And trying to push for it does not mean that the entire, change should come from one side. The entire exercise has been one-sided. That is why the investor community is in shock. And I believe that with the engagement we are having now, we will end up having, a compromise. And that should be able to help us in a way. So, like I said, it's a zero deficit budget the government has, read for us.
Thank you for those comments. Just hold for me, Prof. Senor, so are you looking forward to that compromise, such a compromise? Are you even willing as a group to come to some compromise if government reaches out in ways that favor you to some extent? If there are some changes, what changes would you accept?
Correct a few things Lord Mensah said. If Lord Mensah looks into the budget and looks in government's financing program, he will find where the budget deficit is supposed to be funded from. It is coming from the IMF SDR.
It's coming from where?
It's coming from the IMF. So the IMF money, that's where it is. It's 64 billion provision. That's what's the primary source of funding this deficit. All right, so it's not a zero deficit budget as Lord Lansah has said.
I think he used that hypothetically. He didn't say categorically.
No, I understand. I mean, but he's trying to say that there's no source where government is going to get it from. Government has already defined the source of that money. So that technicality does not exist. That has to be corrected. Often when you look at the budget, there's an abridged version. You don't see that. But when you look into the detailed version, that's when you actually get to actually see exactly where this money is coming from. So that should be corrected. This was not designed where government hasn't got an idea where it's getting its money from. Government has a plan for that deficit. The plan and the source of funds is not a Eurobond. It is not any new Ghana, Government of Ghana long-term bonds. It is the IMF. It is straight there in the budget, the provision. Look at financing, overall financing. You see it, the provision in there is there clear. We are going into this engagement with an objective to find a solution that works. We have indicated our willingness to cooperate with government, and we will. We expect government to take a lot more responsibility because the facts, as we keep seeing them, seem to suggest that it has the ability to do so. Government cannot seek to be fat where everybody else grows lean. We are one country. We grow together. We die together. We live together. We'll survive together. So that has to be the baseline. The exact intervention, the exact analytics will be in our engagement. And I'll keep the rest up our sleeves. But this matter must be resolved and will be resolved.
So you're still skirting around the issues a bit for me. I mean, what will be acceptable to you as you go to the table today to negotiate, so to speak?
You are welcome to represent the Ministry of Finance. Or welcome.
No. Of course, I'm not holding grief for them. But I'm just saying that for the sake of clarity.
Ahead of the meeting. I'm not going to have a meeting with you about the meeting. I can tell you generally what our philosophy is. And I've told you the details as to where the room is, where the space is. There are too many spaces. Too many spaces.
But you see, from all of what you've mentioned, it appears to come from government's end, not really from your end in terms of making concessions, which is why I am pushing further.
The revenue side of government's book, who is contributing to it? Is it government that's creating the revenue? Who is funding the revenue? Answer it.
I'm saying we are.
Exactly. So why are you talking about it as if it's not coming from all of us? The unfortunately, the expenditure part is where we all don't sit. It is where discretionary power lies in the politique. So that is where the matter is. When they increase VAT, have you gone on demonstration?
We haven't.
Have you seen anybody go on demonstration?
We haven't.
Haven't they increased your PAYE to 35%?
Yeah.
Doesn't that sound to you that as an individual you are contributing to solving the problem?
So already the point is that we are taking too many hits.
To now create a bias against people who lend government money.
Right.
Instead of going to buy a house and collect rent, they decided to rather give money to government so that its programs can be executed for the good of all. And they also get their fair return, as government would have promised. So if you really want to have an equitable process, then let's go around. Everybody who bought property, because your bonds, your collective investment scheme, your M fund, your whatever, they are all your property. So if government wants to tax people's property, then they should tax everybody's property. So we'll start with the houses. We'll start with the factories. We'll start with the cars. Then you come to the people who lend government money. There has to be equity. That's why the tax that's been brought in creates some equity in the system, and everybody is working with government.
But some of these proposals you're putting forward, Senor, they are not things that we can do in the next few days, in the immediate term. They are things that would likely take some time.
Itself went to sit down and was invigilating. And their collection was increasing by 1,000%. What does that tell you?
Why did they stop? Politics. So if we give you political power for you to exercise it for the good of the people, and decide to use political power to rather facilitate tax evaders, tell me.
We do all know how things work in our part of the world. So let's just be practical.
Let's just be practical. We vote government to fix it.
Right.
So we don't keep having things work like that. What in Ghana will your children grow in?
Government should fix that, senor. Government should fix that. But the reality we've come to know, you saw it with the e-levy and all of that, is that we're pretty slow on these ends. So in the interim, how do we bridge the gap?
About existing laws. I'm just giving you an example. The problem is that this country, everybody has a classmate. So you know me. When I go and I'm misbehaving, I call you. So guys, we all need to reset our thinking. Government needs to come and tell that, look, we're in tough times. Going forward, the good of the country is what is supreme. We are taking no prisoners, no politics. The politicians, if you are in my party, you are the one with the foremost responsibility to pursue the good of my government. So when we get you, you are the first person we'll deal with the most. Not you are the last person we'll even think of dealing with. So now start. Go and do your invigilation. All of you in government, all of you in the media, all of us in the advocacy space, we support government. We have to help our country win. But our country and our leaders must be doing the right things. So look at all these things. Go to the port. Look at the Exemptions Act. Look at the money we are losing.
Right.
Look at the Auditor General. Look at the money we are losing. Take the petroleum sector, which I used to head. 5 billion cedis. Right now, I'm sure it's 6 or 7 billion being lost. Nobody is chasing the people because party apparatchiks.
In fact, this morning, a guest of mine during the news review, Mr. Suman, was talking about tax waivers and how arbitrarily they are giving out. That's another area.
So let me tell you, Akakpo, the solutions are there. The only thing that is that it takes a certain high level of responsibility and the commitment to sweat. It is not the easy part out because you have to look into people's faces that you know and you have to take strong action. I pay my taxes every now and then. The DRA is on my case. I'm still having engagements with them because I filed my taxes. How many big men in this country file their taxes?
And that's a good question you're asking because even the Attorney General has spoken about entities and even mentioned lawyers who often get some sums and do not pay taxes.
The lazy route, which is now the route of punishing those who trusted government, must stop. And you know one thing that I wish Lord Mensah was here because this is also a lecture of finance.
Professor Mensah is on the line. He's still with us.
In every given economy, the lead provider of loanable funds are households. So when you now destroy the savings culture of households, how do you think the economy will sustain itself in accessing loanable funds? Loanable funds to undertake projects, loanable funds to build factories, to facilitate businesses, to promote government investments, infrastructure investment, largely they come from households. So when you go and touch that particular subsector, you are clearly destroying the financial fabric and sustainability of your environment and your economy. That is why you don't touch. Yesterday, I told the finance minister, I'm a shareholder of a bank. I do accept that we will take a hit. And as a result of taking that hit, which I haven't objected, it means that I am going to actually suffer access to returns for 5, 6, 7 years. I own a fund management company. We have agreed, whatever the final position is, to subject our shareholder funds to. Meaning, me, that today I'm an unemployed graduate, I won't have access to my income. But I've accepted that as part of my sacrifice to my country. But as individuals, when you touch that sector, you are destroying the entire economy. So it is not just academic. Because with the banks and everybody, you have
Senor, mention has been made. It's been said clearly that, yes, we're going to feel some pain, but if we don't do this, the economy will be destroyed anyway.
It's not the case. Anybody who tells you that is ill-informed. You see, thankfully, the school, we all went somewhere. And some of us, we made the school go through us. We didn't just walk through the school. So we know our stuff. I've been around for a while, understand the policy frame, understand the private sector frame.
But you do accept.
I have served 2 opposing governments.
Right.
I understand the space, and I'm telling you, it is not the case. One, listen to the banks. The banks have rejected the whole idea. They are rightly entitled to.
But we heard from the Association of Bankers actually come out on our platform to say that, look, don't subscribe to this. We are not, as in its current form, we are not in support of it. So technically, it's a no from them.
No. They are telling you that we need modification. Your principle, your concept, we are willing to be partners, but there has to be modifications. All that shows you that you have willing partners on the table. So we need revisions to it.
Okay.
If the country fails, all of us will fail. So nobody wants the country to fail. But
that's the exact point I was stating about the economy. If the country fails, we fail. And
yeah, I agree. But the person with the primary responsibility is the government of the day.
Right.
So when we are looking at the sacrifices required, they are the ones to lead. Think about it. Government wants to rather grow fast and telling us to starve. Does that make sense to you?
A quick point. Before that, let me just bring in this. Saeed says, why did you not bring in someone from government to also explain to us government's position? Because government's position has been out there. It's clear. We have the documentation. We've heard from the finance minister. In fact, he was on PM Express just a few days ago, reiterating some of them. So we know exactly what the position is, Saeed. But very quickly on this. So if some concessions have to be made, clearly, from whatever end, if you as individual bondholders are not willing to make concessions, even going into this... Hold on.
What do you mean that we are not willing? What shows that we have not already made concessions?
What concessions have you made?
You are sitting there having to accept it to pay more taxes. You don't think it's a concession? My brother.
I am asking you, Senor. In terms of the bonds of which we speak,
all of us, haven't you accepted to pay more taxes?
I get it. We're paying more VAT. We're still paying the COVID-19 levy and all of that. But I'm just asking. So then, you are willing to make concessions. Else we're going to have a stalemate, and the situation will just fester.
In this matter, it's a matter of sharing reason and supporting, because there are different ways to really assist things work. Look. The country, we only have one country, my brother.
Senor.
What you don't realize is that this approach of touching this individual has a more lasting impact on our sustainability. It is not transactional. It's not about saving money in 2023.
Right.
It's about destroying a savings and investment culture for over a decade. Today, everybody wants to take his money and go and buy a land. People want to take their money and go and buy a dollar. When that happens, how will businesses get money to borrow from a bank? The cost of funds is going to go through the roof. And then you realize that all the things that you're trying to achieve right now becomes negative. We call it, in Ludo terms, 2-6 and loss. You play 6, then the last one loss. That is what we want to avoid. Look, as a person, as an investor, I've lost money because I'm accepting my companies to take a hit. As an individual, I practically have nothing to lose. I'm telling you, I have told and declared that to my members. But the implications of this is lasting. So they must be protected. I have accepted that my businesses should not be protected. But the lives of others must be protected. You think I don't have my brains on? Go and check on the CSD if I have any investments that is that relevant for this conversation. I'm not here fighting for myself. I'm fighting for the sustainability of the Ghanaian economy. Because I'll still live in the economy.
We're grateful.
So it's not me. It's about what is critical. Sometimes, all of us, when we're in the policy space and then we are struggling, we just look at the numbers. Move this person here, move this person here. Sometimes we don't look at the longer-term implications. On the immediate term, you think you have solved the problem. But you just wake up one morning and realize you're actually dead. That was our job. to bring it to government's attention that maybe you are missing some part of this. But as we work as a team, we can shape things right together. So we'll do it together.
We'll have to sew it up here. I think your point has been made, and we can only wish you the very best as you judge all with the Finance Ministry, government, so to speak, later today. Thank you for your time, sir.
Pleasure, mine.
And that is Senor Hosi. Earlier, we also had Martin Kpebu. They've joined forces and they're going to be negotiating, so to speak, with government later today in that technical committee meeting. We still have Professor Mensah on the line. Prof, so just to look at one point that has been made about the local banks, if you look at their share of the 137.3 billion cedis, you would realize that in terms of the bonds they hold, it's the equivalent of 43.38 billion. That is about 31.6%. And that's a huge chunk. That's about a third of the total sum that we are looking at. How consequential will it be now that the banks say, we don't really want a part of this in its current form? And how do you react to the NPP itself? Some of the members, the General Secretary has said that pensioners, for example, should be exempt. He's been calling on the party to do something about this debt exchange. We know about the pensioners going out, but even the party in power has its executive saying, look, this thing must be handled properly. Final words.
Looking at the vulnerable, I mean, there's the disabled who have invested their monies in government bonds, and then also the pensions who don't have any income generation, power. And obviously, it's a good call. But then we need to look at, what a government intends to achieve. And at the end of the day, we come to a compromise. But to say no to everything at all is quite problematic. I believe that the entire exercise needs to be revised. With the banking sector, hopefully, I mean, they have the expertise, they have the good eyes to see, what it will be good for them. I mean, when it comes to the possible coupon payment levels and how it is structured, or possibly the patterns that government can adapt to ensure that they get satisfied so that it won't distort their balance sheet so much. If government goes ahead to, implement what we have now, the tendencies are very high. There is a likelihood that some banks may have to sacrifice some of their reserves that they've been building over the years. And it will turn up that, they will not be happy doing that. And in that regard, they may maybe lay off, few workers here and there. So there are economic repercussions, but I believe that, government will come to a compromise. I've said it over and over again by indicating that the entire exercise was one-sided. Government placed a proposal, and there's been reactions, and these reactions will come to, will bring a compromise for which, parties involved in the entire debt space will support, so that we have, a very good, economy for all of us.
Thank you so much, Prof, for joining the conversation. We'll see how, I'm sure after that meeting, we'll come back and judge on these matters once more. Professor Lord Mensah is a lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School. Do we have Martin Kpebu on the line? Hello, Mr. Kpebu.
Yeah, Mr. Akakpo.
In some 30 seconds, what would be your summary comments?
That's what Senor said. So I think let's just go with it. We are on one front. So
right.
But maybe one sentence. What we've said and what government agreed is that we are going to the committee to see how, number one, efforts to make to help government raise revenue. And then two, and the easiest one, cut down government expenditure. That's the one that is resonating with the public now, because that one is easy. It's in the budget. We see the line items. We can say, okay, this route, this particular route, we can just do away with it. Yes, not that it's not important, but we can sacrifice wait one more year so that let's endure the traffic for one more year so that we can free up money so that individual bondholders will be paid. Let's look at this particular other infrastructure. We don't want it for this year because it will hurt people, it will kill people, it will destroy people's businesses. So those are the things we are going to sit down and do. And so it's a very good development. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Kpebu, for joining the conversation. He is a lawyer and he represents that caucus of individual bondholders who are saying they don't want their bonds to be involved in this domestic debt exchange program. Well, I need some water right now, which is why shortly I'll be stepping away, because water is life. It regulates your body temperature and keeps you alive and kicking. Awake is premium purified water treated through a strict purification process to ensure that every bottle on the market refreshes you better. And guess what? We now have the perfect sizes for all occasions. 330 and 500 ml bottles to fit your pockets and bags, 750 ml for the heavy drinkers, and 1.5 liters for those who always want more. Everybody can get their share. We have introduced our special 19-liter jars as well for offices and homes. Now, all you need to do is just stay awake with Awake Purified Drinking Water wherever you go. So come on, grab a bottle of Awake water and get quality hydration. Awake Purified Drinking Water, one for life. And here's the heartwarming bit. For every bottle you purchase, an amount is donated to the National Cardiothoracic Center. It's produced by Casapreco. For bulk purchases, just call 0262 351 251. This advert is FDA approved. Now stay with us. When we return, is the latest global info analytics on the MPP and the NDC going into election 2024. The Vice President, Dr. Bawumia, together with Alan Kyerematen, are neck and neck, about 40% apiece when it comes to MPP voters. But nationally, Alan Kyerematen is in a lead, according to the report. And for the NDC, it's John Dramani Mahama in the lead. But what are the other permutations? What can we expect? Stay for that conversation up next. Welcome back on the AM show. And we get into our second big story, and that has got all of us smiling and thinking. But joining us for that conversation, the ever B and B. Good morning, Bernice.
Good morning, Benjamin. That was an interesting conversation you had over there with Senor Jose Akakpo and
Senor Jose is passionate about this thing. The last time he came here, he was thumping up.
Yeah. And this is real life issues.
Yeah.
Jojo Kobna, our features editor, has done well to bring us the stories of people who've been affected. And there's one about a 77-year-old who has prostate cancer, who is diabetic and hypertensive. And he says, look, I need these coupons for my medication. So I will be following, especially today's meeting, and let you know how things turn out. But this morning, for our second big story, we focus on partisan politics. And the latest national poll conducted by Global Info Analytics shows Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia and Alan Kyerematen are leveled at about 40% apiece among NPP voters. But among general voters, Alan Kyerematen has the upper hand over Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia in the race to lead the NDC. The poll shows John Dramani Mahama is still the favorite to lead the opposition. We discussed this with Dr. Kobi Mensah, lecturer, political communication, Department of Communication Studies, University of Ghana, and Dr. John Akakpo, CDD fellow, also Catherine Apeku, former Minister, Tourism, Arts and Culture. Good morning to you, and thank you for joining the program.
Good morning.
Let me start with you, Professor Lord Mensah. In the October 2022 report by Global Info Analytics, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia had a slight edge over Alan Kyerematen to lead the party. That is for persons who voted NPP. Does it surprise you that there is a switch now? And what do you think could be leading to that?
Okay, thanks for the question. First of all, let me make two corrections. My name is Kobi Mensah.
Kobi Mensah, forgive me. We just spoke to Professor Lord Mensah, so forgive me about that.
It happens. My in-law always tells me people confuse me with Lord. And then again, I'm not at the School of Communication or Department of Communication. I'm at the business school, only that I tweeted that I'm doing an adjunct position at the Department of Communication Studies. So that's the corrections.
Thank you.
Well, it wasn't surprising because I held the view that obviously because the vice president has that position and as a result has almost declared his intention as a result of what he does in terms of his activities, etc. It is clear that he wants to contest the flag bearership. And so it is a common knowledge, to most people. So back then in October, if you ask people, certainly they would put him ahead. Now, when you take Alan Tremontin, for example, he hadn't then declared his intention, although he has his backers who, usually would do things on his behalf, but he hadn't then declared that he was actually contested. And he hadn't actually taken any campaign-related activity that would actually sort of give some kind of momentum to his perceived candidacy or candidature or intention to contest. And so Bawumia actually enjoyed that particular space. Now, fast forward to 2023 January, and then he declares his position. Or even, I think the poll was conducted between December and January. So by then, people have actually had enough hints to suggest that, yes, he was going to contest. And that is enough for people to be very sure of his position. And then, of course, have that particular opportunity to decide between him and the Vice President Bawumia. So that could actually account for the reasons of the jump. Of course, also from October to now, we can talk about the emerging issues. We are now talking about haircuts. We're talking about domestic, debt restructuring or exchange. So many other terms that we never used to be associated with the economy. Obviously, in the past, if you have heard haircut, you would think that someone had actually gone to a salon. Now it's part of our economic lexicon, a haircut. If you weren't a finance student or economic student, I don't think that, or a banker, I don't think that you would have actually heard domestic debt restructuring or debt exchange. You might not have heard that. But now everybody has heard. And of course, it centers on the very platform that Dr. Bawumia actually stood on as the best economic person or the best person to manage the economy of this country. Now, the way things have turned, certainly people would have quite a number of concerns. And then, of course, contribute towards his electability. And so these are some of the reasons why you would find that Alan now is taking a surge ahead of the Vice President.
Interesting. We'll be delving deeper into some of the details shared by Global Info Analytics. But let me take your thoughts, Dr. Kwapong. It's getting interesting by the day. We've seen especially how it's playing out on social media since the parties are yet to openly tell us when exactly these presidential primaries will be held. What are you picking, especially from this particular research conducted? You have some reservations?
So, good morning once again. I think, first of all, we really have to commend the work of Global Info Analytics. It's not an easy task to try and regularly conduct these types of surveys and polls in a space like Ghana, especially if you have to do it on the ground face to face. It's a very daunting task, and it's also very costly. And so for the regularity with which they try to do it, I think they must be highly commended. And so as you go through it, some of the what I call signals from voters that they are picking up, it's really spot on. If you look at, for example, the issues that voters are highlighting as being very important to them, the economy, jobs/unemployment. These are the issues that over and over again, Afrobarometer also keeps picking up as very critical, crucial issues. I think the only place that I had some questions in my mind is the choice of candidate in the party primary. I think it's more the preference of the voters in terms of who they would like to see the NDC pick or who they would like to see the MPP pick. Because again, you have to understand that our two main political parties do not have open primaries when it comes to their presidential primaries. The NDC does have open primaries when it comes to parliamentary primaries, right? And so the only people who can really give us a true sense of which of the candidates are in what kind of a lead when it comes to the primary are the delegates who are going to vote. So that's the only section where, as I read it, I kept saying, okay, these are more voter preferences. But I don't know if there is a way of identifying the party delegates themselves and then testing their pulse on that question, because I think it is the party delegates who can give us a clear indication of how the race is playing out. Of course, we can look at some of the dynamics. We can make some speculations. I have said that at least on the NDC side, my hunch is that I just don't see anyone toppling the former president if he formally declares that he's going to throw his hat in the race. The MPP race is very interesting to watch, given all the various dynamics. You look at the likes of Mr. Lansah, who's always harbored presidential ambitions, and the song at the end of his speech was, a drone, so it's his turn. But again, you also have an incumbent vice president who, over the last 3 election cycles, especially the 2016 election, has built quite a strong following and networking within the party and also at the grassroots level. So again, there's some interesting dynamics over there. But overall, like I said, I really commend the work of Global Info Analytics, and that's the only part where my own reflection is that it reflects what voters would like to see and not necessarily an indication of what we think the delegates will do.
And it's interesting to note that the researchers define party affiliation in their research or their findings as the party the voter usually votes for. In the case of first-time voters, the party they intend to vote for. Floating voters are voters who vote different political parties over several election cycles or do not align themselves to any of the registered political parties. Now let's get into the details of their findings, and let's start with the NPP, which, like you mentioned, is quite interesting to watch. In October last year, like I mentioned earlier, and Dr. Akakpo Mensah responded to that, the vice president had an edge over Alan Tremantin. So that was among all voters. So what you're seeing right now is who to lead the NPP all voters. So let's just do this. The blue represents October 2022 and the red represents January 2023. Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia had 31%, shot up a bit to 32%. Now for Alan Tremantin, 44%, but it's dropped to 41% now. And someone else, 8%, shot up to 9%. Kennedy Ejapong, who has recently declared his intention, is 14-14, so he hasn't lost or gained. And others, 4% and 4%. Now let's look at who to lead NPP voters only. And we've already defined what the researchers mean when they say NPP voters only. For October 2022, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia had 42%. Alan Tremantin had 40%. For January 23, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia had 40% and Alan Tremantin had 40%. So there you have it. But let's look at the new entrant, Kennedy Ejapong. I remember in my conversation with Dr. Nyaho Tamaklo, he did indicate that he felt that the party was losing sight of giving prominence to persons who had served, who had done, according to his estimation, great work for the party and who deserved to be given the nod to lead. He wasn't too clear on who automatically should be leader of the party, But let me find out from you too, starting with you, Dr. Kobi Mensah. In the scheme of things, who appears to be the natural leader going into the 2024 elections for the NPP?
That's John is laughing. I think that that's a very ambushed question, but of course I would answer that. By the way, let's remember that the study, just like John was explaining, again, is not a longitudinal study. It's a cross-sectional, which means that they are not following up the voters, the people who they interviewed in October.
Exactly.
They are actually, randomly sampling. So that could account for the differentials, some of them. Of course, the other issues, I think John has actually covered it, fantastically well. My analysis is that when you look at a voter psyche, of course, political parties go into elections, and I always tell my students, you have three elements. Sometimes they go beyond three, depending on the appeal of the other element. So you're going into the elections with your party itself as one element. You're going to the elections with your presidential candidate, another element. You're going to the elections with your policy, another element. Sometimes you could have your vice candidate who actually connects to a particular segment of the voters. And so that could be crucial. If you look at Barack Obama at the time, he picked Joe Biden because of his international policy, or the foreign policy, and then, of course, his connection with the Senate and the lawmakers, for example. So that was a good, credentials for Barack Obama to actually tap in. Now, when you come to Ireland, if you look at 2000 election, President Kufuor actually chose Aliyu because Aliyu connects to a particular, a voter bloc, and he made it obvious. I mean, President Kufuor never shied away to tell us the reasons why he chose, Aliyu. Now, going forward, of course, that applies to NDC as well, the kind of candidates that they choose. Going forward in 2016, in fact, 2012, then 2016, Nana Addo chose Bawumia. Obviously, it was, he told us the reasons why he thought Bawumia was the fantastic fit, his economic credentials perceived, and so many other reasons, of course, regional bloc, religion, etc. So that were the reasons why he chose. Now, if you ask me who would be the natural leader, I would ask you that you have to go back to the voters who, at a time, perceived, Dr. Bawumia to have a fantastic credentials in the areas that he was pitched, to Ghanaians, and then ask them whether they still hold that particular view. I did discuss or analyze on your show, the other show last night on Joy FM, JoyNews, that if you give the formula which we call the expectation confirmation theory, ECT, most people in marketing or in management somehow would actually understand that. And then you have expectation of the people before you sold them the item or the good, let's say 10% expectation level. And then when you have delivered the good to them, their experience of the performance, which we call perceived performance, is at 5%. They tell you that, oh, I expected 10%, but it's at 5%. What will be the result, which we call disconfirmation? So you would have either positive or negative disconfirmation. If you have to go to the people and ask them, how did they expect this government to perform, and especially on those candidates who have actually demonstrated their intent to actually contest, they will tell you their expectation level. And then, of course, they will tell you what they perceive as the performance. Now, if you minus that, you will get a disconfirmation, whether it's positive or negative. I do not think that if you go and ask Ghanaians whether what they expected of Dr. Bawumia, for example, has been delivered, I'm very confident that they will give you the negative answer. And that would be my results or my answer to you. I don't think that he would have the ability, to lead, the NPP by telling Ghanaians that he can perform, because to Ghanaians, they had actually given him, the chance, and I don't think that they are convinced that he can perform. So I keep asking myself, what would Bawumia actually tell Ghanaians in terms of what he is coming to do? Because we have given you the chance. Now, assuming that he had the opportunity some few years ago, and then that performance is not very fresh in the minds of the people, of course, he would have the room to justify, and then of course maybe the intervening person had not actually performed and said, what I told you, perhaps I could have performed better than that person. But we don't have any intervening person. Right from the Nanado's regime, he wants to lead the party. What is he going to tell Ghanaians when it is so fresh in their memory that you said you could actually handle this economy and you couldn't? What was he going to tell you? So I don't know who is going to be the likely or the natural candidate or the leader, but that's my analysis. Thank you.
Dr. Kobe-Mensah, Benjamin here. I'm coming in briefly on this bit.
Thank
so
you,
it's interesting because the other day interacting with Nana Hininto, a former General Secretary of the NPP, who is also in Alan Chemating's camp, he said that on the back of some of the baggage, in fact, that the Vice President has, for him, he shouldn't even contest. So it's interesting dynamics. But I'd like to find out from you, noting that Kennedy Ohene Ejapong is making some inroads, 14% back then and now, I'd like to find out from you, who will most likely suffer between Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia and Alan Kojo Chemating if Kennedy Ejapong puts up a strong performance based on the results we're seeing from this study? Who would most likely be the casualty of Kennedy Ejapong's progress?
Okay, thank you. Now, I wouldn't pretend that I know very much the MPP delegates and their psyche. I would be very wrong to tell you because I'm still learning the internal party systems and how the delegates actually think or reason. It is a very new area for me to actually study, and I'm still studying. But I can tell you on the face value, if we look at the common basis for analysis or for psephological analysis, looking at demographics, in terms of geographic areas, looking at, demographic areas, looking at so many other factors, you would think that perhaps Alan stand to lose because you would think that Kennedy Ejapong, obviously from the south, obviously, central region, etc., he probably connected a certain base within the MPP delegates. And as a result, he would be able to chip away some of Alan's, possible gains, for example. And as a result, allow maybe, the Vice President Mahmoud Bawumia to sneak in or others. But that is not so simplistic. I mean, we always say that there are other dynamics that we may not necessarily be, privy to, which may come to play. Who knows? When you think about the Northern Caucus, maybe, the Vice President may not be able to also, get the entire votes, from that particular side of the delegates. And so that could also be at play, but it may not be visible to us. So on the face value, yes, it could be that, it looks like Kennedy Ejapong could chip away from Alan Chemating, but the dynamics could be different, especially when it comes to internal party politics. Don't forget, there are also, strategies at play. Sometimes you would find that a candidate going into the final round might think that, well, I do not think that I have enough, base for me to really, look into this. And so they will pledge their support, behind another candidate. All these are possible dynamics within internal party politics.
Dr. Kwapang, I'll come to you shortly for your response on who is likely going to be the natural leader of the NPP going into the 2024 elections. But let me welcome Catherine Afiku, former Minister of Tourism, on the show. Good morning to you, ma'am. It's been a while. Great to have you on the show. And we understand that you are in support of the bid of Alan Chemating to be leader of the NPP going into the 2024 elections, right?
Good morning, Bernice, and a very big morning to your cherished listeners and viewers. Yes. Happy New Year, too.
Interesting. And why is that? I mean, why do you support his campaign?
And why not? Bernice, as you have just listened to Dr. Kobi Mensah, this country has had the opportunity of post-92 assessing potential leaders, giving opportunity for people to serve the nation. And based on analysis that has been corroborated by the Global Info Analytics research, I feel strongly that if the internal party election will go in the favor of Alan Kwadwo-Kyerematen, the party has a higher chance of breaking the 8 that we are all aspiring to. It's as simple as that. I mean, the analysis, the research, the track record, and the longevity of service points to that direction. And that is why some of us have decided to volunteer to support and go down to the delegates and give them the analysis as to if we want to win power, let's present a united front with a candidate that's most very, very probably able to break the NDC front.
There's a concern. There's a concern about his association with this current government, which is trying very hard to deal with the economic crisis that we find ourselves in, and how that could impact his chances of leading the party. Even if he got the nod to lead the party, it will affect his chances of becoming president. What do you say about that?
Then it would also go to the logic that everybody who is part of the NDP does not qualify to be elected. No, I disassociate myself from that kind of statement. The party is in government, and the government has an economic management team led by the vice president. We all know that the NPP first term, we did a marvelously wonderful job. Now, the second term has faced hurdles, challenges. We cannot run away from that. And it is not internally generated. We all agree COVID was not planned, came. We all also agree that, external factors, international issues have also had impact. But nonetheless, everyone, including myself, who's NPP, knows that we have made some gains, and those gains can be eroded if NDC comes back to power. We have the history to prove it. Post-Akakpo, when we were out of government, the 8 years of NDC, the CSOs and the academia will attest to it that a lot of gains were eroded. So where we are coming from, those of us who have served in government, who have sat down and done the research, we have a better chance of sending in Alan Kwadwo-Kyerematen as the leader to push us to solidify the gains made in our first term in part of our second term, so the transformational agenda will be solid and Ghana stands to gain. That is all we're saying. All of the rest, about 8 or 9 potential contestants, are equally competent. But me and a lot of the private sector-led businesses in Ghana feel very strongly that we need someone with a track record who can really solidify gains made by the NPP government. To enable us to break the 8, we need a winner. We need a winnable candidate. We don't just want a flag bearer. We want someone who can break the 8 with practical examples of what we can do by empowering the private sector, by truly making it the engine of growth. I think that is where my excitement comes from, that we have a chance, but we can only do that if we go down and speak to the delegates, appeal to their conscience, and plead with them, because this is a vote session. It is not imposing. The NDC is going to go for coronation. We all know that. No matter what they do, it's just coronation. But in the NPP, it's going to be a contest of ideas. That is why Alan Kwadwo-Kyerematen came out proactively with his GTP plan. So Ghana is being appealed to that. If I'm given the chance, if I'm given the baton, this is my game plan. Now he has set the bar so high. Anyone and everyone aspiring should bring their blueprint. What is it you intend for Ghanaians to see you do if and when given the opportunity? So I feel very strongly that he has a private chance to do it.
Will it be easier for Alan Kyerematen to be president if this government is able to take out of the economic crisis we find ourselves in?
I think nothing will be easier for any government coming in post-IMF, during IMF. We have to be very realistic. But you need an astute leader who can stand the tenacity of all the challenges that we have been through before. I mean, both of us know what we're going through right now with the DDE, with all the extra baggage that is going to be surmounted with astute leadership. When we are through this IMF negotiations and we go into it, it will be a straitjacket to ensure fiscal responsibility. 2023, 2024 is automatically locked in. So you need a leader who will be able to hold on to the baton, not erode the gains. And Alan brings a fresh start. He is going to be the leader who can hold the baton from President Akufo-Addo to ensure that MPP continues.
Is it not a case, like he said, it drew missile, and we're told by big wigs in the party, especially on how Alan Tremantin was spoken to allow President Akufo-Addo to go and be flag bearer, eventually becoming president. So it's more like, I deserve this now simply because I allowed Akufo-Addo to go and it's my turn, and not necessarily because amongst those who've put their heads up or amongst those whose names have come up to be flag bearers of the party, he is definitely the best choice. Is it not more of a thing of entitlement?
Not exactly. If you really take a moment to study the tradition of our great party, way back, when, of course, the military coups ended, if you look at the tradition from our days of Sunyani Congress, bringing it all the way to the Legon Congress, there has always been a tradition that the party cannot shy away from. But that does not give that automatic blanket check that, yes, because it is a hierarchical tradition, nobody else can contest. Then we might as well be like the NDC coronating President Mahama. No, ours is a tradition that is respected, but at the same time, contest is given the opportunity so people can come in and battle for ideas. And then, for me, the GTP that Alan Tremantin has laid out gives him an edge, and Info Analytics has corroborated that. The research on the ground, if you really delve deep into the research, you see that over 39% of the respondents were entrepreneurs, business communities, people who believe that private sector can propel this country into a first world, support his bid. They don't have to come out and campaign or do what some of us former appointees would love to do, but they resonate. That sentiment of, look, let's give this industrialist a chance because he knows the blueprint for success. So it has nothing to do with just solely the tradition. It plays a role. We all know about the great sacrifice in Legon in 2007. And we also know about the great sacrifice of President Akufo-Addo, who allowed and permitted President Kufuor. Back then, he was the main campaign manager for President Kufuor. So the tradition has merit. But at the same time, unlike the other parties in the country, MPP allows for contest, and it's a contest of ideas, and the delegates will choose and choose so that the country benefits more. That is why he came out with GTP. He has already brought out his vision, appealing to the nation that, look, once I get to the head of the delegates, I have a plan. I have a plan. And that is what is resonating with private sector. Someone who has a plan ready to step into the big shoes is what excites individual and independent thinkers in the country. And for me, that is a fresh of breath air, and we need that.
When you look at this latest poll, Madam Afeku, you would realize that both Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia and Alan Tremantin are neck and neck when it comes to the generality of voters. But when it comes to NPP voters, then you'd be looking at quite a bit there when it comes to whom they think will be leading the party. There's quite an advantage there for Alan Tremantin. But I'd just like to find out from you, it's a matter of wins and losses. In terms of the approval rating of Akufo-Addo, the president, in October, if you look at between October and now, he's gained some 6 percentage points. But on the question of the direction of the country, interestingly, only 18% of respondents say the country is headed in the right direction, compared to 71% who believe it is headed in the wrong direction. So based on that, you also look at the question of whether the NPP can break the 8, and only 24% of voters actually believe that can happen. How much of a hurdle do you think that would be for the former Minister for Trades and Industry, whom you are backing, especially when even in the party, the NPP, the numbers, though they may be a little more in favor generally, in the NPP, they are still neck and neck.
Yes, and Bernard, I'm so glad you brought that up. If you go back to
the name is Benjamin, actually.
Hello?
Go ahead, Madam Afeku.
Yes, I'm saying if you go back, if you do the introspective of June, July, this research actually had us trailing the vice president. And then you bring it 6 months later, we are neck and neck. It's very encouraging for the trade minister and his strategy going forward. This is January 2023, and in politics, 24 hours could change the dynamics of any leader. So when you are in this business, you are not prepared when you see the dynamics actually progressing in your favor. It just gives you the momentum to solidify your base and to speak to the delegates and convince them that, look, I have a chance. I was trailing, and now you see there's a change. Also, when you bring in the exigencies of the economy and the challenges we are all aware we are facing, it could turn around. It could turn around in the next 2-3 months when IMF, of course, I'm not so proud of saying that, but when IMF is brought on board and it helps us with fiscal stability and fiscal responsibility, we will be able to get an even keel, and the same global info analytics will come with the challenges that are turned out. It's the cyclical nature of politics. But I can assure you.
So you're basically saying, Madam Afeku, that, well, if things change as far as the economy is concerned, if we get that IMF deal, it could tilt things in favor of your party and breaking the aid. But you also have to look at the aspect where, as things stand now, and of course we can prognosticate, look into the future, but no one knows what the future holds. As things stand now, if whether the Vice President, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, or Alan Kwadwo Kyerematen were to go head-to-head with the former president, they would lose. What does that say about breaking the aid?
And that is today, my dear. The election is 24 months away. And that's what I was giving you, that the dynamics of the political system that we run. That is today. And today, fast forward to December 7, 2024, the dynamics will be totally different. And if you also read deep into the general perception in the country, the general populace feel more confident handling the economy by NPP than NDC. And even at the back of all challenges, that is the sentiment. If you look at NPP and NDC, we are neck and neck, 34%, in spite of all these challenges that we are facing. So I am extremely confident that Ghanaians will listen to a fresh of breath air, a person who has come out with a plan that, look, once we get through this challenge, once we get through the IMF jacket, once we are able to come through this storm together, I am capable of leading this nation to the next level. And that is what we are marketing. That is what those of us who believe in this vision are telling the nation. Give him a chance. But we first have to get through the hurdle of the delegates. And I can assure you it is resonating.
Right.
It's resonating. The research team are not party members. They're just telling it like it is. This is the mood in the country.
Right.
Let us give this industrialist an opportunity to serve the nation. And we will hound and pound on that, but with respect and humility.
Just a quick intervention. You say a breath of fresh air, but there are those who watch the political scene, and they'll tell you there's nothing new from Alan Kwadwo Kyerematen. There's nothing new from Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia. We've seen them in action. In fact, for Alan Kyerematen, this is his second stint as Trades and Industry Minister. 1D, 1F was under him. He's been heavily criticized for that. For the Vice President, he has his own criticism, but you don't hold brief for him, so I wouldn't bring him in. So what technically is new? The GTP and other things about fighting corruption and the private sector and boosting it, these are all things that have been said, touted, and not exactly lived up to expectation.
I would tell you for a single fact, none of them have been the president. That is the fresh air. If any of them, and those you have just mentioned, we have about 8-7 contestants that are equally competent. If they get a chance to sit in the chair, things have a better way of proving to Ghanaians that MPP is a better manager of the economy than the NDC. We have to look into it that we are not contesting internally and ending it there. We're looking to face our opponents, our friendly opponents, to manage the economy of Ghana. And we're looking for a leader who can take the baton and continue the transformation, albeit the challenges that we are going through. So that is the message, that we will get through the storm. But when the storm is over, who is best suited to hold the fort? That is the message. And the delegates going down, it's resonating. And then you also have the added advantage of tenure, longevity of service, loyalty, faithfulness. Those are just all spices you add into it. But the critical message is who is best suited. All of us are qualified. If you read the Constitution, you're above 40, you vote, you have no criminal record, you are qualified. But who is best suited? So the challenges will not go away. We can't wish it away. Even if we put in a messiah, it will not go away. But that's what leadership is made of, to show your tenacity and to storm the weather with your support and the support of God and our countrymen. So that is really the message we are sending out there, but with humility, not entitlement, with humility. And I know that, Joy, you do a good job of an analysis. You heard Kobe Mensah. You heard him. What is it that we can do to turn this around? And for me, I feel the best man suited is Akakpo Chairmantin.
Thank you so much for your time this morning. Catherine Afiku is former Minister of Tourism, Arts and Culture, and she is a supporter of the Akakpo Chairmantin campaign to be the next flag bearer of the NPP and by extension the next president of Ghana. Dr. Akakpo, let me come to you now. You've heard Madam Afiku try to justify why she believes that Akakpo Chairmantin should lead the NPP into the 2024 elections. But for you, who appears to be the natural leader of the party?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one because, she alluded to, this tradition that you tend to see in the MPP, which is whose turn it is, right? So from the late Prof through the former President Kufuor and then current President Nana Akufo-Addo. And so going by that quote-unquote progression, then one would have sort of said, yeah, with Alan also having always been in the mix during all of those contestations, then you would see why you would be tempted to say, Edruna, so it's his turn. But the dynamics have also changed, right? So in comes Dr. Bawumia in 2008. And in 2008, he was a more quiet, laid-back, reserved figure who was, an active part of the campaign. But you look at his progression, especially in 2016, he becomes the face of the party. If you look at who really made the case for why the NPP should be elected in 2016, particularly on an economic platform, I would say a lot of the credit should go to Dr. Bawumia, right? And so he's coming, he's endeared himself to key sections of the party. He really, put everything on the line for the party in 2016. And so that has changed the dynamic, right? That now he becomes a very viable, quote-unquote, replacement for who next should lead the party. That is why it's very difficult to say naturally it should be person A or naturally it should be person B. My money is, if I were in the betting business, I think my money is still on the vice president. I believe, I have this hunch that, when all is said and done and the race is settled, I still think he would pull it off. And I think he will pull it off because I think he's really endeared himself to the party. He's worked, not to say that Mr. Akakpo Chairmantin or the other candidates have not served the party well or have not worked hard for the party. But I think he's really endeared himself to the party. He's become very dedicated to the party. He's worked really hard, especially in election 2016. And yes, anybody who is elected to lead the NPP would face one common problem, which is they would have to explain why they should be giving a chance again in 2024 on the back of everything that has been experienced in terms of the economy. Alan would face that, he's part of the government and therefore he would face that question.
Right, Doc.
Yes, it would be intense for Bawumia, but it's hard to say natural, but if I were to place my bet, I think my money is on the vice president.
Right, but Doc, considering the fact that Akakpo Chairmantin has resigned now, and Dr. Bawumia is still in office, don't you think that Dr. Bawumia will feel more of that pressure of still being in government and still having the opportunity to remedy some of the problems as against Alan Tremantin, who is now out of government, and so he may have to pay the bigger price for that?
Correct. I mean, he would feel the pressure. He's the vice president. He's the head of the economic management team. So yes, he will feel more pressure. But it also doesn't absolve Alan completely, Mr. Tremantin completely, because he was also part of the government. And if you listen to his speech very carefully, you will notice that he and others who were part of the government would also face another challenge, which is how do they walk that fine line between saying, I can do better on the back of everything that we have seen with the economy, whilst at the same time not appearing to throw their party under the bus. And that would be a very challenging line to walk, right? Which is, you want to be able to say, to acknowledge that some things haven't gone well, I can do better, etc., etc. But how do you create that narrative so it doesn't also look like you are abandoning a party and a government that you were part of for at least a good 6 years? I mean, that would definitely be more challenging in the primary. But yes, I understand that. I mean, given the elevation of the VP, his role in the economic management team, he might feel more of that pressure than, let's say, Mr. Tremantin.
This next question is based on something you said, Dr. Kwapong, but it's for both you and Dr. Mensah. So you made mention of the fact that Bawumia, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, the vice president, was basically the economic poster boy, the face of the 2016 campaign of the NPP. Now, could those same dynamics work against him from the standpoint that people feel he has a lot of baggage, a lot of it economic, where we find ourselves as a country and all of that. So could that, both within the party, at the party level, when they go for the delegates to vote, or if he makes it past the party level, at the national level, could it cost him? Could it have the reverse effect? I'll start with you, Dr. Kwapong.
Yes, it could have the reverse effect. I think internally, the dynamics may be a little different in terms of what the party delegates will be looking at. But yes, some of that, he was the economic poster boy for 2016. The economy has run into some major challenges. Therefore, in the minds of the delegates, what is going to be their calculus? Do we reward him for his commitment, his hard work, everything he's done for the party? Or do we let those, do we look at the economic dynamics and say, yeah, we don't know how we would make the case for him, and therefore let's look for another candidate. So that would play internally, right? And then, of course, the much bigger challenge would be when it comes to the general election. Because now that you're past, your party delegates and you've won the flag bearership, I think the biggest challenge Dr. Bawumia would face with the general voters is, how do you explain everything that was argued and advocated for in 2016 against the reality of everything that we have seen? Right. I personally don't think that it would be enough to blame, to explain it from the standpoint of COVID or the Russian-Ukraine war, because I've seen the public commentary and that doesn't necessarily sell anymore. I also don't think that the phrase, the alternative is scary, would sell that much anymore. So he's in a very tough position to try and really explain what happened, and if he's elected president, what he can do differently. And that's no easy task that is facing the vice president.
Dr. Mensah, on the same point.
Okay, Ben, thank you. I think, John, that's where I would disagree politely with you on that in terms of the two candidates who would have an easier, not easy, but who would have it amongst them easier task of doing it. Now, I draw, sorry to say that I draw a little bit on my theories. there is what we call rational choice, and I'm sure John is very familiar with. From the electoral, studies, we know that apart from material inducement, voters and very much, within parties are very rational in terms of their choices. One of them is whether, within the party itself, whether a candidate stands to actually deploy the goods, the public good, for the benefit of those electors. I mean, those who are actually doing the voting. And so if you go by some of these, understanding of how voters actually pick their choices, I think that it would be difficult to make the case, for, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia than the trade minister. Why am I saying that? Take these, office or the whole governance structure as departments in a business. Take it as a commercial entity. You have been given one department to herd, i.e., Dr. Bawumia had been given a department to herd, which he prominently was pitched as the one who's heading that particular department, the economic management team. And we heard him several times reading names and say, what a solid team, which he was leading. So take him as one department. Take, Alan Chomantin for his department as well. And then try to tell Ghanaians which of these two do you think had managed their department better and deserve to be given a chief executive position. I doubt if Ghanaians would really tell you that the choice is, Dr. Bawumia, or if the delegates, in NPP would say that, it's Dr. Bawumia. I think it's very difficult. Now, unless, of course, the inducement, which I talked about, which is very much, in the public glare, that, voters in Ghana are sort of induced, and so sometimes the highest bidder actually pays. Right. And we know, obviously, a trade minister can never in any way compare with a vice president who has almost all the goodies at his disposal. So that could actually be the game, changer, for example, who is much more resourced. But if we have to go by the second theory, which I said about the rational choice, I do not think that the electors, the delegates of the NPP, as we speak, do not have some kind of a conundrum or do not have some kind of a difficulty in thinking that this Bawumia project is a reality, especially if they still believe that they can actually break the 8. I don't think so. Now, let's look at who can actually decouple, all right, from the regime performance. Now, again, if I go into my theory again, in my own PhD, I studied President Kufuor, and then with a theory of or a framework I call political brand architecture, we're looking at the strategy where political entities could be coupling and decoupling at the same time and be able to convince, the voters. Sometimes it is difficult for you to think that political entities can decouple, but they can decouple. Because if you take, for example, a candidate of an NPP or an NDC, you would think that naturally an NDC, a candidate is completely coupled with NDC policy, with NDC tradition. But literature and studies have actually shown that, empirical studies have actually shown that there are times where you can have a candidate decouple from the party in order that they can connect to other interested or other segments of the voters. So to speak, they can de-align and say that, well, I know that I'm standing on a center-right political party, but I'm a very much of a center-left. I'm a very much social, in my thinking, in my approach, in order that they can connect with the voters who believe in, social democracy and still win the election. We saw that in Clinton's, election at the second term, when he decoupled very much from the Democrats' position and aligned with what the Republican position of a leaner government, and formed a strategy called the triangulation, and therefore won the election. For me, Bawumia would find it difficult to decouple. Why? Because he was very much touted as the driver of this economy. President Nanado made him the chief driver and said that this is the whisked, economic whisked. He's going to arrest the city. He himself said
at a point, the president mentioned that he is the one in whom all knowledge, wisdom has been,
Absolutely.
he's the repository of all wisdom,
Absolutely.
all knowledge.
You cannot say that for Alan Chemanton. In fact, when it comes to the state of play, for example, into the governance, into that administration, we have seen consistently Dr. Baumia talking about transformation of this economy, so and so. We have seen very less of Alan Chemanton, and his media engagement. In fact, some people always say, "Oh, is he in government?" Because I think there was a reason. There's a history between him and the president. As a result, you do not want to upstage the president. So he takes a little synthesis. If Alan comes to tell you that, which he said in his speech, that at some point I disagreed with the president, or he didn't actually say that specifically, but he said that at some point I thought things would be done or could be done differently.
Right.
That's a clause for decoupling. And for me, he can come and confidently tell Ghanaians that I thought that the country could be taking a different direction. But I can't say that.
So bottom line, what you're saying is it would be much more difficult for the vice president to extricate himself from this situation because, like we said, his face was put there. But my final bit to you, even before Bernice comes in and we wrap the conversation, when you look at the state of corruption, why am I bringing it in? Because part of the woes we are facing currently in terms of our economy can be tied to corruption. The finance minister himself has said we lose over $4 billion every year. We probably wouldn't need to go to the IMF. Other sources say we lose up to about $6 billion. When you look at this survey, the state of corruption in Ghana, we're actually, when you look at those who are saying it is getting worse, we're actually inching further, 64% from 62%. Now, it has become topical. We're looking at the economy, corruption, and all of that. How much of a factor do you think the state of corruption in Ghana will play, gentlemen? And I want brief answers, 30, 40 seconds on this, in the elections, both internally and in 2024.
John, would you like to go first, Ash?
Yes, well, internally, I think internally the calculus of the delegates will be slightly different. I think internally they'll be looking for, okay, who can we hedge our bets on that can lead us to victory in 2024 and break the 8 like we want to. But I think nationally, yes, that would be one of the issues that would come to play, particularly because of the growing perceptions that the issue of corruption is worsening and it's deteriorating. We seem to be losing the fight against corruption.
Okay. Well, just like John, I don't think that corruption is a vote catcher, especially within internal party politics. I mean, to be very honest with you, when you engage, even the grassroots, the activists, they think that it's something that even if they get opportunity, they would do, honestly. Now, there was a time my dean did a study in his class, public admin class, and he was shocked to see how people thought that the society itself is very endemic in corruption, showing that even when people get opportunity, they will do the same. So they don't see it as a problem. Again, the state or the country itself has not actually made it as a prominent issue. We haven't prosecuted people for corrupt practices, yet we arrest people who actually steal 5 cities. The nation itself hadn't made it like a culpable offense based on which people will vote against when somebody is known to be a corrupt person. So it's not a vote catcher. But of course, if we can explain the implications of corruption to people's livelihood and make people see the reasons why a corrupt person must be kept out of government, perhaps we will be successful in making sure that it's a vote issue. But currently, it's not a vote issue, both nationally and internally, internal party politics-wise.
Right. Dr. Kobi Mensah and Dr. John Akakpo, thank you so much for doing this with us this morning. And there's more to digest in the Info Analytics survey, especially on the NDC yesterday. Kojo Bongsu spoke to Joy Prime and outlined why he believes that he should be given the nod to lead the NDC.
One interesting take.
Into the 2024 elections. When we speak to leaders in the NDC, some of them subtly suggest John Mahama will still contest. We haven't heard from him officially, but even from their programs.
But if you look at the poll,
exactly.
even this poll, it gives him about, what, 96% versus 4% for Dr. Kwabena Duffuor.
And even for their programs, he speaks as a natural leader. Many have questioned in what capacity is he speaking at party functions, even though he's not been selected. Your quick thoughts on the seeming endorsement by the party and how it will potentially affect other people who will come up to be leaders going into the 2024 elections. Let me start with you, Dr. Kwapong.
Well, I really believe that the former president would throw his hat in. We have just about a month to find that out officially, right? The NDC would open nominations. You can pick up the forms in February. So between February 20th and 22nd, we will get a confirmation. But I think everything that we've seen the former president do and say in the public space, I sincerely believe points to the fact that he will definitely throw his hat in the ring again and contest in 2024. I don't see any, and so far the only candidates whose names have come up or have officially said they would want to throw their hats in Mr. Kwabena Duffuor and Mr. Kojo Bongsu as well. I mean, I really don't see, my money is on him in the NDC primary. I honestly don't see anybody beating the former president. I just don't see how they can pull it off. And again, when you look at some of the major key establishment figures in the party, they all seem to be, in subtle ways hinting, endorsing, So again, I just don't see any other candidate but former President John Mahama leading the NDC into 2024.
Dr. Mensah?
Bernice, the signals are too green. They are too green, not to think that he's not going to, not to think that he's going to contest. I mean, you see that he is the de facto leader, and when I say the de facto leader, of course, political parties do not want to show that there is a what do you call a gap in terms of, because when you are in a position, you still have to deliver. All right. You still have to speak for the people. Now, I always say that the reasons why, opposition parties are crucial is because as ordinary people, we cannot stand to contest a government. The government machinery is too heavy for ordinary people to speak for ourselves. In fact, at some point, they were chasing some of us. You may not have the thick skin to face a government machinery, but the political party has the ability to actually do that for you. So political party in opposition is as responsible for your welfare and for your benefit just as the political party in government. And when they're in a position, they've got to have someone to actually speak for them. Obviously, you may think that, party chairman, party general secretary, but that is other regimes. I mean, if you go to South Africa, for example, the party chairman would actually speak, on behalf of the party before perhaps a candidate is elected. In our case, we tend to give the power to the flag bearer, and as a result, even when they cease to be flag bearers or they are waiting to be elected flag bearer, they still hold the power, and that's why you find, former President Mahama speaking, for the party. And just like John said, I don't see any other candidate. They could put themselves forward so that they will be seen lurking within the front line, and as a result, if maybe after his term, they would also become the front line, which sometimes I think maybe that's what Baumia is doing, although I'm not sure. You know, so you would find people lurking, around as a way of making sure that they are in the midst of the frontliners. But I don't think anybody could actually assail the former president. No.
Thank you, Dr. Mensah and Dr. Akakpo, for joining the program. God willing, we delve deeper into the dynamics of the NDC tomorrow, because it's interesting, Benjamin, that there are many angles to this. If the NDC puts up John Mahama, per our constitution, he would have only one term to serve. And so
and that is something that Kojo Bonsu has, poked holes in.
Exactly.
And said that you need someone who can deliver some continuity. But others have also posited that, look, if you want the best chance of winning anything, especially as we're talking about the Global Info Analytics polls, which have, shown time and again per their surveys that John Mahama would be able to create some counterbalance if he were faced with Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia or Alan Kojo Chebate. So it's a pretty dicey game, and of course we will leave the NDC to play it, the delegates to play that football.
Exactly. So do make a date with us tomorrow as we delve into the NDC bit of that info analytics survey. Well, the Ghana Revenue Authority wishes to inform you, especially those wishing to apply for tax clearance certificates, to do so online or download the Ghana Taxpayers app on Google Play Store or the App Store. Applicants who visit the Taxpayer Service Centers will be assisted by officers of the authority to apply. Applicants are also required to indicate the taxpayer identification number, that's TIN, of the institution or organization requesting the certificate, so they can receive a copy. Applicants should take note and be guided accordingly. Kindly contact GRA's toll-free 0800 900 110 or via these WhatsApp numbers 055 299 0000 or 0200 631664, or send an email to gra.gov.gh for further enquiries. The GRA also wishes to inform the general public, especially those registered for value-added tax, that's VAT, that the Domestic Tax Revenue Division has commenced the implementation of an electronic invoicing system of VAT referred to as EVAT. This involves integrating the invoicing systems of VAT-registered taxpayers to the Commissioner General's invoicing system. Kindly contact GRA's toll-free once again 0800 900 110 or via these WhatsApp numbers 055 299 0000 or 0200 631664 for further enquiries. We'll take a quick breather. When Benjamin and I are back, we get interactive with you. Do stay. Thank you for staying on the AM show. We are back to get interactive with you. You can have your save the number to call.
0302 211 691. 0302 211 691. Share your thoughts with us and let's know what you think. So we've spoken about the political end of things. We've spoken about the debt exchange program. And boy, did we get some people who were very firm. Martin Kwebu and Senyo Hosi. I'm looking forward to that engagement today, to see what comes out of it and whether any concessions will be made. Because, look, I foresee that looking at, I wouldn't call it intransigence, but the different positions, Kenoforiata, we must do this. The other side, don't use our money. I don't know whether it will not end in a stalemate and what the consequences of that could be.
Well, the finance minister has admitted that some concessions will be made. I don't know if the individual bondholders forum will succumb. I don't know what will convince them, because they have said emphatically that they do not want to sign on to this debt exchange program, no matter how...
Senyor Hosi this morning was saying that we've already made concessions, the increment in VAT and all of that. Those are concessions we are having to deal with. So why heap more agony on us?
I don't know. So let's leave it to the technical team to look into this, and let's see what they come up with. Let's see if government can be really creative with this one, because sometimes you need to find really creative ways to involve everybody's input into ensuring that you get what you want and the people get what they want. I don't know if anything will make the individual bondholders forum change its mind, but we've got our fingers crossed. Once they are still engaged in government, you cannot tell if there will be any point of
maybe government just might get the buy-in. Maybe. But there's also that thorny bit we just discussed about politics in Ghana and the permutations. So from what you deduced from what we looked at, the latest Global Info Analytics survey, what is your reading, looking at MPP, NDC politics and the way things are going?
So it's good that we have the survey or Info Analytics sharing with us the methodology, because once again it's important to note, like our guest hinted earlier, that this is not the same group of people they're going to. This is not the same group of people they're going to. This is cross-sectional, so they're moving, and so
the results will keep changing.
But what is the real value of it in terms of when we go proper to vote, in terms of the delegates who have to choose their flag bearers?
That's what is going to count.
Interesting. We have a first caller from Pando. Hello, Frank.
Hello.
Hello, good morning, Frank. Let's hear you, please.
Good morning. Yeah, I recommend Martin. Yeah, good morning. I recommend lawyer Martin Kwebu. I thank him very well for the great work he's doing.
Right. Thank you very much for calling, Frank.
And I wish the government to listen to reduce the size of the government.
Right. Thank you for calling. Frank is joining the show from Pando. Let me just remind you that when you call us, please reduce the volume on your television set. Listen to us on your phone so that you can give us real-time responses, Benjamin. So it's an interesting year ahead. I mean, I was looking forward to this year when we were wrapping up 2022 because we know how it's going to look like for many of the political parties and the dynamics, the politics which has already started on social media, BMW, you know about BMW, AFA,
and all kinds of
things.
I mean, some of them we even saw Atajay at the point, and that was just hilarious. But you know something interesting? This government practically has only 2023 within which to maneuver, get an IMF program, and make some economic sense of where we are. 2024 is lost because of the electoral cycle. So it will be really interesting how they ramp up stuff in 2023.
Abdullah is joining us. Good morning to you. Let's hear you, please.
Good morning, my sister.
Let's hear you.
Good morning, my sister, and good morning to my good brother for your good work this morning. What you have done for this country, I think that is we need to recover you for your hard work. What I want to say is that Alam and Bawome to lead NPP. And I'm telling you that we the North, we the people of Northern region here, we are going to vote for Alam just because this is Alam's time. We were telling Alam that he should wait after Nanado will come. And we the Northerners, we are some people that we don't promise and failed. So because of that, Allah will get a matter of vote.
Abdullah, yes. I think you'll be safe to speak for yourself. When you say we the Northerners, what do you mean? Are you a delegate of the NPP?
Yes, I'm a delegate.
Okay.
I'm a delegate. I'm speaking from experience. I was in Legon when we elected Akufo to be our leader. I was there. And currently, all elections that Alam went through and he didn't win, it was because of Nana Akufo that we say he should wait. So if there's a time in NPP, we'll give it to you.
So you're speaking on behalf of the Northern Caucus of the NPP delegates, is that it?
I am telling you from what is in the ground.
Okay.
I am telling you what we are going to do in this election. So don't worry. All things that I'm telling you is that after elections, you confirm what we are discussing today. It is obvious that Akufo governments we have done a very good job for this country.
Thank you, Abdullah. We'll have to take Thank you, Abdallah. Sorry, we have to take other callers.
Now that's an interesting take.
Yeah, we're quickly running out of time there. Sorry about that, Abdallah. We're squeezing last 1 or 2 callers. Today we've been discussing the debt exchange program. Government currently meeting individual bondholders. And we've also been talking about the Global Info Analytics Survey, which pitches Alan Chiramanting as a leader of the NPP going into the 2024 elections based on his latest survey. Our next caller is Joseph. Hello, Joseph. Good morning to you. Let's hear you, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I am Joseph Atim, calling from Winkovu. My issue is the government, at least, they should listen to people. The collapse of the banks, at least, people have lost money as a result of that. And it was that the banks were non-performing. So if this is the issue, and now people put money into with government, having trust that the government will be able to give them whatever interest they want. And the government is the best area. If you are with the government, you are sure that your money, you will get it. And suddenly, the government is taking that money, which the people trusted them and have. So it's something wonderful. So they should do something about it. The way they want to use people's money for this debt exchange program, I think is not right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joseph. And Joseph is our last caller there for today's show. Thank you all who called, all of you who joined, those of you who watched on social media. We are grateful that you could join us this morning. God willing, we are back again tomorrow, Benjamin. It's a Friday, how time flies. But as usual, we promise you a great show where we will focus on what matters to you and also have your say, get interactive with you. But for now, from Benjamin and I, it's goodbye. Do stay with us. News Desk is up next.